You're watching Noir Street. I'm your host, Nero Wolfe. Every story hides a secret, and every shadow hides a clue. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. Subscribe, tap the like button, and join us as we drift into mystery. Chapter 1. The paper that smelled like a setup the morning started the way most mornings in that house start. Fritz humming like a man who believes eggs are a moral force, and Wolf upstairs among the orchids, pretending the world can be improved by proper watering. Then the mail arrived, and the world got worse. It came in the mid-morning drop, 3 envelopes and a thin package, carried in by Fritz with his usual dignified care, as if the postman were a supplier of fragile art. Fritz doesn't toss mail. Fritz presents it. He had the tray and the proper expression for duty performed, and he set it on the corner of Wolf's desk. Wolf was in his office, of course, installed behind the desk like a monument to permanent disapproval. He had finished with the plant rooms and was in his armchair phase of the day, reading, thinking, and silently correcting humanity. He glanced at the tray without touching it. Wolf doesn't touch paper unless he must. He regards it as an unclean substance handled by too many hands. "Archie," he said. That meant I was the designated finger. I crossed to the desk, sorted the envelopes, and saw the one that mattered before I opened it because it was wrong in 3 ways. The paper was too crisp, the typewritten address too careful, and it didn't have a return address. I have lived long enough in New York to know that a return address is either confidence or stupidity. This was neither. I slit it open, slid out the contents, and saw a single sheet of white bond paper, new enough to snap, stiff enough to hold a grudge. The typed lines were neat, evenly spaced, clean margins like a schoolteacher's dream. The bottom half of the page was a confession, and at the bottom, in a place meant for a signature, was my name, not typed. Signed, Mr. Goodwin. Fritz asked softly from the doorway, because he can smell trouble the way Wolf can smell an error in logic. I didn't answer Fritz because I was busy having a private argument with my own eyes. Wolf watched me. He didn't move fast, but his attention did. "Read it," he said. "I already am," I said. My voice sounded normal, but my stomach had tightened like a fist. The first pass made me angry. The second pass made me afraid. Because it wasn't a prank. It was too well designed. It was specific in the way a bullet is specific. It named a man, a time, a place, and a murder I hadn't heard about yet. It said, "I, Archie Goodwin, hereby confess that on the evening of Tuesday last, at approximately 9:45, I met Albert Haskins at his office on West 47th Street. I argued with him regarding certain documents and money. The argument became physical. I struck him with a heavy object and left him on the floor. I am responsible for his death. I make this confession voluntarily and without coercion. Archie Goodwin." I stared at my own name at the bottom. The signature had my slant, my lazy loop on the G, my little habit of crossing the T in a way that makes it look like a small knife. I never wrote a word of it. I looked up at Wolf. This is a trap. Wolf's eyes narrowed. I had already concluded that. I held the paper out. "It's got my signature." Wolf still didn't reach for it. "Yes." "That's not a yes kind of thing," I said. "It is a yes kind of thing when it is false," Wolf replied. I set the sheet on the blotter and leaned over it, sniffing without thinking. "Smells like—" I stopped, because the words were ridiculous. Wolf's eyebrows rose. "Like what?" "Like a setup," I said. Wolf's mouth tightened. "Your nose has been educated by experience." Fritz stepped closer, cautious. "Mr. Wolf, should I telephone Inspector Kramer?" Wolf did not answer Fritz. He was looking at the paper as if it were an insect pinned under glass. "Archie," Wolf said, "what do you know of Albert Haskins?" "Nothing," I said. "Never heard of him." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Yet your confession claims you killed him." "News to me," I said, "and I'd like to keep it that way." Wolf leaned back slightly. "Then we must proceed with intelligence." I made a sound. "We always proceed with intelligence." It's the stupid
Nero
people who
Wolfe
get to
and the
proceed with
umbilical
comfort.
cord of wristwatch.
Wolfe
A
ignored
jeweler
that and
shows
said,
Wolfie a
"Bring
watch
me the
that only
telephone
runs when someone
directory."
touches it.
Now, I
Open the
asked.
back, there was a
Yes,
hair
Wolfe
thin
said,
wire,
unless
like
you wish to
the
remain
watch is
ignorant of the
tied to a
identity of the
bicycle.
alleged
Are you
victim.
guilt? Let's figure it
I
out.
fetched
Just
the
so
directory and found the
hope you
listing.
like it.
There was
Come
an
back
Albert
next, and I
Haskins,
will draw
attorney,
part two.
offices on West 47th. Not unusual. New York has more attorneys than pigeons, Wolfe said. Telephone him. If he answers, I'll faint, I said. But I dialed anyway. It rang 4 times, a woman answered. Haskins and Miller, she said. This is Archie Goodwin, I told her, keeping my voice steady. Is Mr. Haskins available? There was a pause. Then the woman's voice turned careful. Who did you say this was? Archie Goodwin. Another pause longer. 1 moment. The line went quiet. Then a different voice came on mail, clipped official. Who is this? Archie Goodwin, I repeated. I asked for Mr. Haskins. You won't get him, the man said. Why not? I asked. Because he's dead, the voice said, and I'd like to know why you're calling. That made the room tilt slightly, not because I believed it, I'd already read it, but because hearing it said out loud changes the shape of things. I'm calling because I just received a typed confession that I murdered him, I said, silence on the line. Then, where are you? West 35th, I said. Privet residence. Stay there, the man snapped. This is Detective Larkin, homicide. We'll be there. He hung up. I slowly put the receiver down. Wolfe's eyes were on me. He is dead. Yes, I said, as of now. Wolfe's mouth tightened, and the confession has already been sent. Yes, Wolfe leaned back, hands steepled, gaze steady, a fuse with teeth. That's what I called it, I said. Wolfe blinked once. Then you are learning restraint. I'm learning terror, I said. It's educational too. Fritz stood in the doorway, expression strained. Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe finally acknowledged him. Fritz, telephone. Inspector Kramer, tell him we require his presence. Fritz nodded and left. I stared at the paper again. The signature is good, too good. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Indeed, that is what is interesting. Interesting, I said. Wolfe, I'm about to be interesting in the penitentiary. Wolfe's voice was calm. If the law were rational, you would be safe. Since it is not, you are correct to be alarmed. Thanks, I said. Nothing like comfort served cold. Wolfe said, who would benefit from incriminating you? I didn't have to think long. When you do what I do, you collect enemies the way a kid collects baseball cards, but Wolfe's question wasn't, who dislikes you? It was, who would plan this? There was a name that sat in the center of that kind of planning. A name with history. A name with a grin. I said it, Cal Reddick. Wolfe nodded once as if checking an item off a list. Yes. Cal Reddick was a man Wolfe had once humiliated in open court, made him look like what he was. In front of judge, jury, reporters,
Nero
and the kind
Wolfe
of
and the
people who never
umbilical cord
forget public
of
embarrassment,
wristwatch. A
because
jeweler
it's the
shows
only
Wolfie a
entertainment they
watch
can
that only
afford.
runs when someone
Reddick
touches
had
it.
gone away after that.
Open the back,
Not
there was
forever,
a
but
hair
long
thin
enough to
wire,
simmer.
like
Now he was
the
free
watch is
again.
tied to a
And now this
bicycle.
paper
Are
had
you
my name at the
guilt?
bottom.
Let's figure it out. Just
Why
so
me? I
hope
asked,
you like
and
it.
my voice sounded
Come
thinner
back
than I
next,
liked.
and I will draw
Wolfe's
part two.
eyes were steady. Because you are close to me. That's flattering, I said. In a coffin sort of way, Wolfe continued. And because your arrest would inconvenience me, it would also amuse Reddick. Fritz came back in, face a little tighter. Inspector Kramer is on his way. Wolfe nodded. Good, I said. This confession says I met Haskins Tuesday at 9:45. Tuesday, I was here, eating Fritz's roast and listening to you complain about the salad. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Yes, so we've got an alibi, I said. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. An alibi is useful when the law chooses to hear it. I sat in the red leather chair because my legs had decided they preferred sitting to collapsing. Who is Albert Haskins? I asked. Why would anyone kill him and pin it on me? Wolfe's gaze returned to the paper. That is what we must discover. The confession is a tool. Tools are made for a purpose. I leaned forward and studied the page. Typed, clean margins, no fingerprints probably. This is designed. Wolfe nodded slightly. Observe the language. I frowned. It sounds like a man trying to sound like me. It's wrong. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Precisely. The writer attempted to imitate your directness. He failed. Your voice is casual. This is dutiful. Like a bad school report, I said. And heavy object is vague. Wolfe's mouth tightened. The writer did not know what was used. He only knew the death was by blunt force, so the confession was written after the murder. But without details, I said. Wolfe nodded. Or before, with only a plan. I stared. Before. Wolfe's eyes held mine. It is possible. That made my stomach crawl. A confession written before the killing, mailed after. A neat way to say, we can schedule your life the way Wolfe schedules orchids, I said. The signature, how did they get it? Wolfe's gaze shifted to me. How many times have you signed your name this week? I blinked. Checks, receipts, packages, notes. Wolfe nodded. And where? I thought. Office lobby. Sometimes the front step, when a delivery man doesn't want to come inside. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. The house again. I stared at him. You think someone got my signature from a delivery slip? Possibly, Wolfe said. Or from your wastebasket. My wastebasket, I demanded. I don't throw signatures away. Wolfe's eyes remained calm. Then someone has access to something you handled, or someone has practiced forging you. Wonderful, I said. A fan club. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Archie, this confession is not merely an attempt to implicate you. It is also a message to me. What message? I asked. Wolfe's voice was quiet. That a man can reach into my office by paper, that he can force my hand, that he can disrupt my routines. I sat back. So, it's personal. It is always personal, Wolfe said. When someone intrudes. The front bell rang then hard twice. That was Kramer. Fritz went to admit him. I heard Kramer's voice in the hall, loud, irritated, full of authority and impatience. Then he came into the office, like a storm with a badge. He saw me, saw Wolfe, and then saw the paper on the blotter. What is this? He barked. Wolfe didn't answer immediately. He nodded at me. I slid the confession toward Kramer. Kramer read the first paragraph, and his face changed. He read the last line, and his eyes narrowed at my signature. You write this, he snapped at me. No, I said. Kramer stared at me hard, as if staring could force the truth out of my pores. Wolfe spoke calmly. Archie was in this house on Tuesday evening. He did not visit West 47th Street at 9:45. He did not kill Albert Haskins. Kramer grunted. You can't just say it. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. I can. It is the truth. Kramer's jaw worked. Haskins was found this morning, blunt force office ransacked. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Office ransacked for what? Kramer hesitated. That was interesting. Kramer hesitating is like a bulldozer, pausing to think about daisies. Documents, Kramer said finally. Maybe money. We don't know yet. Wolfe's voice was mild. Then you are behind, Inspector. I dislike being behind. Kramer glared. This confession came here. That makes it your business whether you like it or not. It became my business when my assistant's name was forged. Wolfe replied. And when the writer presumed to use my office as a postal box for slander. Kramer's eyes flicked to the signature again. That's a damn good forgery. Or not a forgery, Wolfe said calmly. A copied signature, Kramer snorted. From where? Wolfe's gaze shifted to me. Archie will tell you, I said. From any place I've signed anything lately. Deliveries, receipts, checks. Kramer's eyes narrowed. So someone's been watching your house. Wolfe's voice was quiet. Possibly. Or someone has access to your dead man's office. Or both. Kramer barked. And Cal Reddick. Wolfe's eyes narrowed.
Nero Wolfe and the
Ah,
umbilical
you have
cord
heard the
of a
name,
wristwatch.
Kramer
The
grunted.
jeweler shows
I heard it
Wolfe a
years
watch
ago,
that only
and I heard
works
he
when
got
someone
out.
touches it.
Wolfe
Open
nodded
the back,
once.
there was a hair-thin wire,
Yes,
like
he is
the
free,
watch is tied
and
to a
he is grinning
person.
somewhere in the
Sheer
dark.
guilt,
Kramer's
let's
face
figure
tightened.
out the story.
You think he did
Hope you
this?
like it.
Wolfe's
Comment
voice was
next, and I
calm.
will draw
I think
part
he
2.
is capable of it, motivated by spite, and clever enough to arrange a spectacle. That is not proof. It is a direction. Kramer slapped the confession with his finger. This is evidence. Yes, Wolfe said. It is also bait. Kramer glared. You're telling me you won't hand it over? Wolfe's eyes hardened. I am telling you you may take it, Inspector, but you will also take my conditions. Kramer's eyebrows rose. Your conditions? Wolfe's voice stayed calm, but there was steel in it. You will not arrest Archie Goodwin. You will not harass him. You will provide me with the full police report on Albert Haskins's death. You will also provide me with access to the crime scene, through Mr. Goodwin, so that I may correct your department's inevitable errors. Kramer's face reddened. You can't, Wolfe cut him off. I can, because your department will enjoy explaining to the newspapers why my assistant's signature appears on a confession mailed to my house while he sat here eating Fritz's dinner. Kramer glared at Wolfe, then at me, then back to Wolfe. Finally he grunted. All right, but if you're wrong. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. I am seldom wrong, Inspector. Kramer made a sound and grabbed the paper. Fine, you come down to Haskins' office. Wolfe's lip curled. I will not, Kramer snapped. Then how the hell? Archie will go, Wolfe said calmly, with your men, and he will observe what you fail to notice. Kramer jabbed a finger at me. You stay where my men can see you. That's always my goal, I said. I live for supervision. Kramer turned toward the door, then paused. And if this is Reddick? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Then he has chosen a poor method. He has made me attentive. Kramer snorted and left with his thunder. When the door shut, the office felt quieter, but not calmer. Quiet can be loaded. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, you will go to the crime scene. You will pay attention to typewriters, paper, carbon, and waste baskets. You will also note anything that suggests the confession was composed using information from Haskins's office. I stood. And if I find the typewriter that did it? Wolfe's gaze was steady. Then we will begin to reverse the trap. I grabbed my coat and hat as I reached the hall. Fritz appeared, worried. Mr. Archie, he said softly, be careful. I always am, I told him. It's the world that isn't. I went out into the city, and the air had that winter bite that makes you breathe shallow. Somewhere a man named Cal Reddick might be smiling. Somewhere an attorney named Albert Haskins was lying still on an office floor. And in my pocket, figuratively, was a
Nero
confession that wore
Wolfe
my
and the
name
umbilical
like
cord
stolen
of a
clothes.
wristwatch. A jeweler
Wolfe called
shows
it a
Wolfe a
trap.
watch that
I
only
called it a
works when someone
fuse with
touches it.
teeth. Either
Open the
way,
back, there
it had
was a
been lit. Chapter
hair-thin
2.
wire, like
The man who
the watch is
wanted
tied
payback
to a
Haskins's
person.
office
And a jeweler
was on the
guilt,
third floor of
let's
a
figure
building that
out the
looked like
story.
serious money had
Hope
once
you like
passed through it and
Comment
departed
next,
without
and I
leaving
will
a
draw
forwarding
part 2.
address. I went through it with Larkin watching me the way a man watches someone he hasn't decided to arrest yet. The killer and the police had both been thorough drawers pulled, folders emptied, a locked cabinet forced open hard enough to leave steel marks on the frame. Whatever had lived in that cabinet was gone. The office had one clear statement: the motive wore a file jacket and had been carried out in a hurry. That was Wolfe's idea, of course, because Wolfe's ideas have a way of becoming my errands. He stayed in the office with the orchids upstairs and the law downstairs, and I went out into New York to follow a paper trail that didn't want to be followed. The confession had come through the mail, which is supposed to mean it went through a nice, clean system of stamps and sorting bins and government boredom. But the envelope had been too crisp, too careful, too much like a stage prop. Wolfe had said as much, which meant he suspected it hadn't traveled the full official route. It had been introduced into it, so I started where anything suspicious enters the world. A mail drop. I called in a small favor with a clerk I knew at the station near Times Square, one of those men who can tell you what happened in a room by looking at the trash can. He didn't give me records. That would have been too honest. He gave me a name. Denny Pike, he said. He's a courier, not postal. Independent. Runs packages to law offices, ad agencies, anyone too lazy to walk. Comes in here to buy stamps or drop stuff for clients. Jittery. Jittery is a useful adjective. It means the man either has nerves or a reason. I found Denny Pike 2 blocks from the station. Outside a coffee stand, doing the classic courier stance. Weight on one foot, eyes constantly scanning, fingers tapping as if the city were a drum he couldn't stop hearing. He was in his late 20s, thin, with a face that looked as if it had been carved from worry and then sanded down by caffeine. His jacket was too light for the weather, and his hands were stuffed in his pockets like he was trying to keep them from shaking. I came up beside him and said, "Denny Pike." He turned fast. His eyes flicked over me looking for uniform, badge or threat. He found none, so he tried on attitude. "Yeah?" he said. "Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin," I said. "I'm the guy whose name you just delivered into a homicide file." That landed. His face went paler, and his fingers stopped tapping for half a second before they started again even faster. "I didn't," he began. "Relax," I said. "If I wanted you arrested, I'd have brought company. I just want to know who paid you." He swallowed. "I don't know." "Sure you do," I said. "You
Nero
just don't
Wolfe
want
and the
to."
umbilical cord of
His jaw
wristwatch. A
tightened.
jeweler shows fulfill
"I'm just a
watch that
courier.
only runs
I
when
take
someone
stuff from
visits.
point A to point
Open
B,
the back,
and
there was
sometimes
a
point C is
hair-thin
prison,"
wire.
I
Like
said.
the watch is
"So
tied
talk
to a
while you can do
person.
it in the open
A jeweler
air."
guilt. Let's figure
He
it out.
looked around
So,
like the buildings might be
hope you
listening.
like it.
Then he
Come on
leaned
next,
closer and
analytical
hissed.
part 2.
"I didn't look at it." "You didn't look at what?" I asked, though I already knew. "The envelope," he said quickly. "I was told not to look. I swear." That was interesting for 2 reasons. One, because it meant someone had anticipated curiosity. And 2, because a man doesn't tell a courier not to look unless he's paying him to be blind. "Who told you?" I asked. He shook his head. "I don't know the guy." "How'd he pay?" I asked. Crisp, like it came from a bank. He paid extra, said it was a special delivery. Wolfe would have enjoyed that phrase the way he enjoys hearing someone misuse a word with contempt and attention. "Where'd you meet him?" I asked. Denny's eyes darted, near 47th, by the loading dock behind the building with the law offices. "Which building?" I asked. He gave me the address, stumbling over it like it was hot. "Describe him," I said. Denny licked his lips. "Medium, coat, hat, gloves. Regular guy." "That's not a description," I said. "That's a wish." He swallowed. "I only saw him a second. He kept his head down. He was calm. Calm was more important than medium. Nervous men hire couriers. Calm men hire couriers to do nervous things." "Did he say where it was going?" I asked. "He gave me the address on the envelope," Denny said. "West 35th, the brownstone." He said, "Drop it inside." "Inside," I repeated, "not in the mailbox." Denny shook his head fast. "Inside, like he knew someone would take it." "Did you ring the bell?" I asked. Denny frowned. "Number the door was open." That
Nero
made my
Wolfe and
spine
the
itch.
umbilical
"Our
cord
door
of
isn't open,"
wristwatch.
I
A
said.
jeweler shows
"It
fulfill
was," Denny
watch that only
insisted.
runs when someone
"Just a
touches it.
crack." I
Open
pushed
the
it.
back,
It
there was
opened.
a hair-thin
I
wire.
stepped in,
Like
and there was a
the
guy in
watch
the
is tied
hall.
to a person.
Big
A
guy.
jeweler guilt.
Took it from
Let's
me.
figure it
Didn't
out.
say a
So,
word. Just
hope you
took
like
it.
it.
Wolfe's
Come on
house has no
next,
big mute men
analytical
in the
part
hall
2.
unless Wolfe has ordered them there, and Wolfe hadn't ordered anything except breakfast. "What did the guy look like?" I asked. Denny shook his head. "I didn't look." "Funny," I said. "You didn't look at the envelope. You didn't look at the guy. You didn't look at anything except the cash." Denny's eyes flashed. "I do my job." "You do your job the way a man holds his breath," I said. "Too long and you pass out." He swallowed. "Look, I didn't mean—" "I know," I said. "That's what makes it useful. Because if someone had opened Wolfe's door and stood in our hall to receive that envelope, it meant one of 2 things. Either our household had been penetrated, which is hard to do quietly, or Denny Pike had been told a story to keep him from noticing the truth." I said, "When was this?" Yesterday, Denny said. Late afternoon. That fit. The confession had arrived this morning, but it could have been inserted into the outgoing mail stream last night after being delivered to someone who would take it the rest of the way. Denny, I said, if the police ask, you tell them what you told me. His eyes widened. Polis, you delivered murder bait, I said. Don't be surprised if the fisherman wants your name. Denny swallowed hard. Can you keep them off me? I can't keep anyone off anyone, I said. I'm not a priest. But if you want to stay alive and employed, don't lie. He nodded quickly. I won't. I left him standing there, tapping his fingers again like he was trying to drum sense into his own head back at the brownstone. Wolfe was in his office with the old court transcript spread on his desk like a corpse. He had found it in his files, which are kept with the kind of precision that makes libraries look sloppy. I came in, hung up my coat and said, "Courier's name is Denny Pike, paid cash," told not to look at the envelope. Wolfe's eyes stayed on the paper. Naturally. He met the payer near West 47th, I said. The guy was calm, kept his head down, wore gloves. Denny says our front door was cracked open and a big mute guy took the envelope inside. Wolfe's gaze lifted slowly. A big mute man. Yeah, I said, that's what he claims. Wolfe's voice was mild. Either he is mistaken, or someone entered my house. I sat. Or someone arranged for him to think he entered. Wolfe nodded. Yes, a useful ambiguity. I gestured at the transcript. You're reading the Reddick case? Wolfe's mouth tightened slightly. I am revisiting it. The past is often a motive that refuses to die. He tapped the paper with a thick finger. Cal Reddick convicted after a demonstration of his lies in open court. He was humiliated. Archie, not merely defeated. Men like Reddick do not forgive humiliation. They make it into a religion. I leaned forward. Anything in there that points to this? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Many lines point to it. Every exchange between us is a bruise he would remember. Wolfe read aloud, slowly, a portion where Reddick had been caught, contradicting himself. He didn't quote long. Wolfe doesn't perform. He simply reminded me of the tone, the calm dismantling of a man who believed bluster could become truth. He hated you, I said. Wolfe's eyes stayed steady. He hated being seen, I said, and now he's trying to make the world see me as a killer. Wolfe nodded once. Yes. The front bell rang. Fritz came in a moment later with an envelope on a silver tray, as if presenting poison in proper form. Mr. Wolfe, Fritz said quietly. Another.
Nero Wolfe and the umbilical
Wolfe's
cord
eyes
of a
narrowed.
wristwatch.
Open it,
A
Archie.
jeweler shows full
I
figure
slit it,
watch that
pulled
one
out a
burns
single
when someone
sheet,
touches it.
and my stomach tightened
Open the
before I
bag,
even read
there
it because
was a
it was the
pure
same
thin
clean
wire,
bond,
like
same
the
spacing,
watch is tied to
same
a
careful
button,
margins,
and a jeweler
same
really
fake
pushes that
signature.
trigger out
The
the
note
door.
was short, which
Hope
made
you
it
like
worse.
it.
Threats
Comment
don't
next
need
and wait for
paragraphs.
part 2.
It said, if Archie clears his name, another body drops. And at the bottom, Archie Goodwin. I read it twice, then held it up. Same typing, same signature. Wolfe's face did not change. Of course, I felt anger flare hot, then cool into something sharper. This is the rule, I said. If I prove I didn't do it, someone dies. If I don't prove it, I go down for it. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. A crude attempt at coercion. It's not crude, I said. It's elegant in a sick way. It turns truth into a weapon. Wolfe leaned back, steepling his fingers. The author believes he can control our actions by making both choices intolerable. Can he? I asked. Wolfe's gaze held mine number. I laughed once without humor. That's comforting. You want to tell that to the next corpse? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. We will prevent the next corpse by understanding the author's purpose. I gestured at the note. Purpose is simple. Scare us into letting it stand. Wolfe shook his head slowly. Not quite. The author does not merely wish you to accept guilt. He wishes me to withdraw, to refuse involvement, to abandon investigation in order to protect others. And you won't, I said. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Of course not. I sat forward. So what do we do? If we clear me, someone dies. If we don't, I'm the body that drops, just slower. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. We do both. I blinked. "Both. We will clear you," Wolfe said calmly, "and we will ensure no one dies as a consequence." I stared at him. "That's not Both. That's magic." Wolfe's gaze was
Nero
steady.
Wolfe
"It is
and the umbilical
strategy."
cord
He tapped the
of
new
his
note.
watch.
"This
A
threat
jeweler
reveals
shows
something
Wolfie a
important.
watch that only
The
runs when
author is
someone
watching
touches
us.
it.
He
Open the
expects us
back
to move in a
cover.
predictable
Hear a
manner.
thin
He
white
expects
light.
fear to make
The
us
watch is
careless.
tied to a person. Then
I
it is
swallowed.
revealed
"So we
that is
don't move
where the
predictably."
story.
Wolfe
Hope
nodded.
you like it.
"Exactly." He
Comment
looked at the
next and I will
transcript
talk
again,
part 2.
then at me. "Archie, the name Cal Reddick is useful, but it may also be a decoy. A man with reason to hate me is a convenient mask." "You think someone's framing Reddick too?" I asked. "I think," Wolfe said, "that a clever criminal would enjoy pinning a crime on a man already known to be vindictive and capable." I frowned. "But the typing, the signature," Wolfe's eyes narrowed, "can be arranged. The signature can be copied, the typing can be duplicated." I sat back. "So we have a murderer who can forge my signature and mimic a typewriter, who can kill an attorney, and who knows the Reddick history well enough to exploit it." Wolfe nodded. "Yes, and who hired a jittery courier," I added, "paid cash, and told him not to look." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Yes." I stared at the two papers on Wolfe's desk, the confession and the new threat, both wearing my name like stolen clothing. "The game's rules are simple," I said quietly. "Prove innocence. Buy a coffin." Wolfe's gaze held mine. "Then we will alter the rules." He turned his head slightly toward the door, where Fritz hovered, offended and anxious. "Fritz," Wolfe said, "lock the front door. Keep it locked unless you see the visitor yourself." Fritz nodded briskly. "Yes, sir." Wolfe looked back at me. "Archie, you will now go to West 47th Street. You will examine Haskins' office. You will look for evidence of the typewriter used, and you will look for what was taken. The motive will be in what is missing." I stood. "And if the killer is watching?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Then let him watch, but do not let him direct." I took my coat. As I reached the hall, the city outside sounded the same as always: horns, footsteps, impatience. But now every ordinary noise felt like it had a second meaning, like a man listening behind a door. I had a confession with my name on it, and a threat signed with my hand. And somewhere, a man who wanted payback was waiting to see whether Wolfe and I would choose the only choice he'd left us. Wolfe, of course, had already chosen something else. Chapter 3. Ink, keys, and alibis that don't fit. Wolfe treats most objects as if they are beneath him, which is often true. But he treats evidence like food. He inspects it, he tests it, and then he tells you exactly what is wrong with it, as if you were the cook. That morning, he had the confession and the new threat on his desk, laid out on the blotter like two slices from the same poisoned loaf. He had sent Fritz away with strict instructions about doors and bells, and he had sent me to wash my hands. Not because ink is contagious, but because Wolfe likes rituals that remind the universe who is in charge. When I came back into the office, Wolfe was seated behind his desk with the expression of a man evaluating a dish that looks handsome and smells suspicious. "Sit," he said. I sat in the red leather chair and eyed the papers. "Are we still pretending this is just paper and not my funeral announcement?" Wolfe's eyes did not lift. "You are alive, Archie. Restrain your melodrama." "Fine," I said, "my preliminary funeral announcement." Wolfe nodded faintly, as if acknowledging my attempt at maturity. Then he did what he does when he intends to reduce something to facts. He began with
Nero Wolfe
mechanics.
and the umbilical
"This
cord of
confession,"
his watch.
Wolfe said,
A jeweler
"is not
shows
merely a
Wolfie a
lie.
watch that
It is
only
a
runs when
manufactured
someone
lie.
touches it.
Therefore,
Open the back
it contains
cover. Here
manufacturing
a thin
marks."
wire
He
light.
lifted the confession
The
by
watch
its
is tied
edge,
to a
careful
person.
not to smudge
Then
it,
killer
and
kills.
held it
That
at
is
an angle
where
toward
the
the light
story.
from the window.
Hope you like
"Observe the
it.
paper,"
Comment
he
next
said.
and I will
I
talk
leaned
part
forward.
2.
"White paper." Wolfe's gaze snapped to me. "Do not insult me, wait." I pinched the corner lightly, heavier than cheap letterhead. £20 bond, maybe. Smooth. Wolfe nodded. "Yes. Common office bond. Not stationary, no watermark, no letterhead, chosen to avoid identification." He lowered the page and ran his eyes over the typed lines. Spacing, Wolfe said. Pica, 10 characters per inch common. I said, so it could be any office in Manhattan. In general, Wolfe replied. Yes, but not in particular. He reached for his magnifying glass, the one he reserves for flowers, rare stamps, and human foolishness, and examined the typed letters as if they were insect wings. The ribbon strike is fresh, Wolfe murmured. I blinked. You can tell that? Wolfe looked up, annoyed. Archie, the ink is dark, even unbroken. An old ribbon produces faintness, inconsistency, feathering. This ribbon was either new or recently re-inked. That narrows it down to every office manager who likes neatness, I said. Wolfe ignored me and continued his quiet examination. Then he stopped. His stillness had a particular quality, the way a dog goes rigid when it hears something behind a hedge. Ah, Wolfe said. I leaned in. What? Wolfe tilted the page toward me, the letter R. I stared. The R. In the word argued, Wolfe said, and again irresponsible. I squinted. At first it looked normal. Then, once my eye caught it, I couldn't unsee it. The R sat slightly low and to the right, as if it limped. The vertical stroke hit cleanly, but the upper curve was a hair off center, giving the letter a faint slouch. It's crooked, I said. Off center, Wolfe corrected. The R key is misaligned. It strikes lower than the line and slightly right, a distinctive defect, like a limp in footprints, I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed with approval, which for Wolfe is a small reduction in irritation. Exactly. That defect is a signature, not the forged signature at the bottom. This is the machine's. So we find the machine, I said. We find the typer. Wolfe nodded. Yes. I sat back. Okay, the typing is our lead, but the other half is the timeline. The confession says Tuesday, 9:45, Haskins' office. Wolfe's gaze lifted. Yes. I told Kramer I was here, I said. I remember being here. Wolfe's eyes stayed steady. Memory is fallible. We will not rely upon it. That was Wolfe in 3 words. We will not rely. He gestured toward my notebook. You will map your movements on Tuesday evening every quarter hour. Not your feelings, your actions, I grimaced. I didn't think I was going to need a timetable for being innocent. Wolfe's voice was cool. You do. The author of that confession has already provided one, and his is designed to be plausible. That made my scalp prickle. You think he wrote it to fit reality? I think, Wolfe said. He wrote it to fit your reality. He handed me a sheet of paper, begging. So I did. I started with dinner, Fritz's roast. Wolfe's complaints about the salad, my comments about Wolfe's comments. That part was easy, because meals in that house are timed like trains. 7 to 8, I said, writing, dinner. Wolfe nodded. Continue. After dinner, I said, I was in the office, reading, doing correspondence. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Precisely when? I frowned. Around 8:15, 8:30. Did you leave the house? Wolfe asked. I opened my mouth to say no, because no felt comfortable. Then I closed it, because comfort is not evidence. I began. Wolfe watched me without blinking. I sighed. I did go out. Wolfe's eyebrows rose slightly. Why? I rubbed my forehead. Because Fritz asked me to pick up something. Fritz, who had been hovering near the doorway as if guarding the kitchen's honor, stiffened. Mr. Archie, I looked at him. Fritz, don't make me say it like it's a crime. Fritz's face tightened. The nutmeg. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Nutmeg, Fritz said, defensive but dignified. For the custard. The tin
Nero
was
Wolfe
empty.
and
I
the
did not
Unravel
wish to,
of
how
Fritz
do you say,
Watch.
compromise.
Jeweler shows fulfill
Wolfe
a watch
regarded
that
him.
only runs when
So you
someone
sent
touches
Archie
it.
out.
Open the bag.
Fritz nodded.
There was a
Yes,
fluorescent
sir.
wire
It was
thread.
only 2
The
blocks.
watch is tied to a
I
peg.
stared at my
The
notebook.
jeweler killed
That's right.
figure it
I
out
went to
the
the
story.
all-night grocery on
Open
9th.
light,
It was cold.
comment
The
next,
clerk
and
was
we will go
rude,
part
and
2.
I bought nutmeg and cigarettes. Wolfe's voice was calm. And what time? I squinted at the past. Around 9:20, 9:30. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. How long were you gone? I hesitated. 15 minutes. Wolfe said nothing. I sighed. Maybe 20. Wolfe's eyes stayed on mine. Archie, all right, I admitted. Closer to 30. I ran into a guy I know outside the place. Lon Cohen's runner. He had a story about a politician and a nightclub, and I stood there like an idiot listening. Then I walked back. Wolfe leaned back slightly, as if letting the truth settle into its proper shape. So, Wolfe said, there was an interval between approximately 9:20 and approximately 9:50 during which you were not in this house. My stomach tightened. That confession says 9:45, I said quietly. Wolfe nodded. Yes, but Haskins's office is on West 47th, I protested. That's not 2 blocks. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. By taxi, it is not distant. I stared at my notebook. The words I had written, nutmeg, cigarettes, sidewalk conversation, suddenly looked flimsy, like alibi tissue paper in a rainstorm. Wolfe, I said, I didn't go to West 47th. I believe you, Wolfe replied. But belief is not what we require. We require proof. I leaned back, feeling the room tighten around me. So somebody didn't just forge my name, they forged my life. Wolfe's voice was quiet. They selected a time when your absence from the house is plausible. That indicates knowledge. Of your habits, of Fritz's habits, of this house's habits. Fritz looked stricken. Mr. Wolfe, I did not know. Wolfe raised a hand. Fritz, you are not guilty of asking for nutmeg. You are guilty only of assuming the world is honest. Fritz's mouth tightened. I do not assume, I hope. Hope is often punished, Wolfe said. I said, so the murderer knew I'd have a gap, or created one. Wolfe nodded. Yes, now, Archie, the alibi map has a snag. That is useful. It tells us the author is not careless. I frowned. Useful. It tells us I can't prove I wasn't there. It tells us, Wolfe corrected, that the author anticipated your defense and attempted to neutralize it by choosing a window of uncertainty. I sat forward, and the typewriter has a limp R. We find that, we find the author. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. We find the machine first. The author may use intermediaries. I snorted. You mean like couriers? Wolfe nodded. Precisely. The front bell rang then. One sharp pull. Fritz went to answer, and I heard voices in the hall. Kramer, loud as usual, and another man quieter. Fritz returned with Inspector Kramer and Detective Larkin, the homicide man who had answered my call to Haskins's office. Kramer's face was sour. All right, Wolfe. We got the report. Wolfe did not rise, proceed. Larkin stepped forward, eyes on the papers. Albert Haskins. Blunt, force trauma to the skull. Likely weapon. Heavy metal object, possibly a paperweight or small tool. Office shows signs of rummaging, files pulled, desk drawers emptied. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. What was taken? Larkin shook his head. We don't know yet, Kramer grunted. But we do know this. He jabbed a finger at me. Your confession hits the time frame. You got any witnesses that saw you in that grocery at 9:45? My stomach sank another inch. I can probably get the clerk, I said. And I bought cigarettes. There might be a receipt, Kramer snorted. Probably might. That's real comforting. Wolfe's voice cut in calm but sharp. Inspector, do not mistake uncertainty for guilt. My assistant's movements include a documented errand requested by Fritz. Kramer glared. Documented by who? Your cook. By reality, Wolfe said, which you often neglect. I held up my notebook. The problem is the timing. The confession's author picked a window where I was out of the house. Larkin frowned. So whoever wrote it knew that. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Yes. Kramer's jaw tightened. Or you did it. Wolfe's gaze turned icy. Inspector, if you insist on stupidity, I will ask you to leave. Kramer sputtered, then shut his mouth, partly because Wolfe's tone had steel, and partly because Larkin was watching him with the weary look of a man who has seen too many cases derailed by temper. Wolfe turned his attention to Larkin. "Detective, was there a typewriter in Haskins' office?" Larkin nodded. "Yes. Standard office machine." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Did you examine its imprint, specifically the letter R?" Larkin blinked. "The letter, the R," Wolfe repeated, patient in the way only Wolfe can be when he expects obedience. Larkin hesitated. "We took a sample page for comparison. I didn't notice." "You will," Wolfe said. "The confession's typing contains an off-center R, a distinctive defect. If Haskins's machine matches it, we have proximity. If it does not, we have exclusion." Larkin looked at Wolfe for a long second, then nodded slowly. "All right, I'll have the lab compare." Kramer snorted. "You and your letters." Wolfe ignored him and looked at me. "Archie, you will go to the grocery
Nero
on
Wolfe
9th.
and the umbilical
Obtain the
cord
receipt.
of wristwatch.
Obtain the
A jeweler
clerk's
shows
statement.
Wolfe a watch
Obtain
with
anything
only
that
one
pins you
finger
there
touches
during the
it.
alleged time,"
Open the bag.
I said.
There was a
"And if the
thin
receipt
white
shows
flag. The
9:37,
watch is
Wolfe's
tied to
eyes
a
narrowed.
person. The
"Then we
jeweler
adjust.
used. Let's figure
If it
out
shows
the story.
10:10, we
Hope you
rejoice.
like it.
If it shows nothing,
Next,
we
another
create
code
other
or
anchors."
two.
Kramer barked. "Create? You gonna forge something now?" Wolfe's voice turned cold. "Inspector, your mind is a swamp." Kramer flushed, but Larkin stepped in quickly. "We'll also pull any building security from Haskins' office, lobby log, elevator, anything we can." Wolfe nodded once. "Good." As Kramer and Larkin left, I sat staring at the confession again. It had felt like an obvious lie when it landed on Wolfe's desk. Now it felt like something worse. A lie built carefully enough to wear my schedule like a suit. Wolfe watched me. "Archie," he said quietly, "the author has made one error." I looked up. "What error?" Wolfe tapped the page lightly. "He believes he can manufacture reality with paper." He leaned back, eyes steady. "We will show him that reality has edges, and edges cut." I stood and reached for my coat, because my life had become a timetable and a typewriter key with a limp. Somebody out there had forged my name, and somebody had gone further, had forged the small, ordinary gaps in my day. The harmless errands, the brief absences that no one notices until they matter. Somebody had forged my life well enough that the law could believe it. Now I had to prove that the only thing real on that page was the danger. Chapter 4. The bait victim, Clara Hume, arrived at 11:40, which meant she was either careful or desperate. Careful people arrive when the morning is almost over and the afternoon hasn't begun. Desperate people arrive whenever their feet can get them there. She was both. Fritz showed her into the office with the practiced dignity he uses for clients, who look as if they might drop something: tears, accusations, or trouble. She came in wearing a dark coat that had seen better winters, and a hat that sat too firmly on her head, as if she'd pinned it there to keep herself from shaking apart. She was in her 30s, slim, with a face that would have been pretty if it weren't so alert. The eyes were the main thing, sharp, measuring, and frightened in a controlled way. Not panic, calculation under strain. Wolfe was behind his desk, installed like judgment itself. I was in the red leather chair with my notebook, because my life had become a collection of dates and accusations. Saul Panzer was not visible, which meant he was somewhere nearby doing what Saul does, being quiet and useful. Clara Hume stopped 2 steps inside the room and looked at Wolfe as if she had come to a priest who might also be a prosecutor. "Mr. Wolfe?" she asked. Wolfe inclined his head. "I am Nero Wolfe. You are Clara Hume." Her eyes widened. "How?" "Sit," Wolfe said, ignoring the question. "If you are here, it is because you have decided I am either the only man who can help you or the last man you can trust. In either case, standing is wasteful." She sat, on the yellow chair, not the red leather, keeping her purse on her lap like a shield. I said, "Do you want coffee, or do you prefer fear straight?" She looked at me. "You're Archie Goodwin." "Apparently," I said, "at least according to a confession I didn't write." Her mouth tightened. "I saw it. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Proceed, Miss Hume. She drew a breath. I used to work for Cal Reddick's attorney years ago. I was the case clerk. Wolfe's gaze remained steady. I remember the case. Her eyes flicked to him. Everyone does. He never stopped talking about it. That was an interesting phrasing. Most men stop talking about losses eventually, if only out of boredom. If Reddick was still talking, it meant the humiliation had been kept warm, fed, and polished. Clara continued, voice controlled but tight. Reddick is free now. He's been out for months. He's been trying to stay quiet. That's the truth, whether you believe it or not. Wolfe's mouth tightened faintly. Quiet is not his talent. I know, she said quickly. That's why I'm here. Because he's scared. I blinked. Reddick scared. Clara's eyes held mine, terrified. Wolfe leaned back slightly. Of what? Clara hesitated, as if choosing how much to say in a room where words become evidence. Somebody is using his name, she said. Using the story, using what you did to him in court. They're turning it into a cover. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Explain. She swallowed. 2 days ago he got a message. Not from you, not from the police, from someone else. It said, enjoy your freedom. You'll be going back in for something you didn't do. I felt my scalp tighten. Samey theme. Clara nodded. And then he heard about the lawyer, Albert Haskins, dead. And he heard your name, Mr. Goodwin, tied to it, I said. Everyone's hearing my name tied to it. Clara's voice sharpened. But it's not Reddick. He didn't do it. Wolfe's gaze stayed steady. How do you know? Clara's hands tightened around her purse. Because he was with me. That landed. Wolfe did not move. He simply watched her, his eyes narrowing the way they do when he has been offered something valuable and suspects it might be counterfeit. On Tuesday evening, Wolfe asked. Yes, Clara said. He came to my apartment. He was upset. He said someone was setting him up. He wanted someone to hear him, someone who remembered what happened. Her eyes flicked to Wolfe again. He stayed for hours, she continued. From 8 until nearly midnight. He didn't leave. He didn't even go down for cigarettes. She hesitated, the word catching. He was afraid to be seen. I stared at her. Part of me wanted to laugh because the idea of Cal Reddick hiding indoors like a rabbit was funny. But the other part of me didn't laugh because it fit too neatly with Wolfe's earlier suspicion, that Reddick might be a mask. Wolfe's voice was calm. Miss Hume, why are you here? She swallowed. Because if someone is using his name, they're going to drag me into it too. I handled files. I know details. And now there's this confession with Mr. Goodwin's signature, and her eyes went to me, then away. They're not just framing Reddick, they're framing you. I said, that's very considerate of them. Clara's mouth tightened. You don't understand. If Reddick tries to clear himself, it helps them. If you try to clear yourself, it helps them. Someone dies either way. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You have seen the threat. Clara nodded. Reddick showed me. A copy. Same typing. Same fake signature. He thinks you're behind it, Mr. Wolfe. He thinks you're doing it to finish him. Wolfe's eyes went cold. That is absurd. Clara's voice rose slightly. He's not rational, Mr. Wolfe. He's wounded. He thinks humiliation is a weapon you can keep using. Wolfe leaned forward a fraction. And you believe otherwise. Clara met his gaze. I believe someone is using that history because it's convenient. It's a story everyone will believe. Reddick hates you. Reddick wants revenge. Archie Goodwin is the perfect fall guy because he's your man. I exhaled slowly. Nice to be appreciated. Wolfe's gaze stayed on Clara. You can give us an alibi for Reddick. Yes, she said, and you can give me protection. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Protection is not a commodity I sell lightly. Clara's eyes flashed. Then call it information. Call it insurance. Wolfe sat back. Very well, your statement will be taken, Archie. I opened my notebook and began writing, because in this house even fear gets documented. Clara gave details. Her address, the time Reddick arrived. What he wore, what he said, how he paced, how he drank water like he didn't trust anything stronger. She gave small things that sounded true because they were useless. When she finished, Wolfe nodded once. "You will remain available," Wolfe said. "You will not speak to the press. You will not speak to the police without informing me." Clara swallowed. "I can't stay here." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Number my house is not a shelter, but I can place you where you will be observed." He glanced toward the doorway. Saul appeared, silent as a thought. "Mr. Panzer," Wolfe said, "Miss Hume will be escorted home. She will be watched discreetly." Saul nodded. "Yes." Clara stood, relief and anxiety tangled. "Thank you." Wolfe did not respond. Gratitude is not on his schedule. As Saul escorted her out, I leaned toward Wolfe. "If she's telling the truth, Reddick didn't
Nero
kill
Wolfe and
Haskins."
the umbilical cord
Wolfe's
of
eyes
his
narrowed.
watch.
"If
A
she
jeweler
is
shows
telling the
Wolfe a
truth,
watch
you
that
think she
only
might be
runs when
bait?"
someone touches
I
it.
asked.
Open the
Wolfe's
bag.
mouth
There was a
tightened.
huge
"Every own in
wire
this matter
like
is bait,
the
Archie,
watch is tied
including
to a
you."
person. Then a jeweler kills
That didn't
the
help my
jeweler after
appetite.
story.
That
Oh,
night,
like
the
it.
second body arrived without
Next,
waiting
and
for
I
my
will drop part two.
cooperation. It happened at 10:15, and it announced itself the way death often does in this city, by telephone, with a voice on the other end trying to sound official and failing. The call came to the office phone. Fritz answered, listened, and then came into the office with his face tightened, as if someone had just insulted his soup. "Mr. Wolfe," Fritz said softly, "Inspector Kramer." Wolfe took the call, listened for a moment, and then his eyes narrowed further, which is Wolfe's way of showing displeasure with reality. "Yes," he said, "I see." A pause. "Where?" Another pause. "Very well." I blinked. "Who?" "A minor criminal," Wolfe said, as if describing a minor stain. "Inspector Kramer discovered him in a room on 8th Avenue. I frowned. "Why do we care about a dead crook?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Because he was found with a copy of your confession on his chest." That made the room go cold. I sat up. "A copy?" Wolfe nodded. "Typed. Same format. Same forged signature." I stared at him. "So the killer printed extras." Wolfe's mouth tightened, or had access to a place where copies are made easily. "A law office," I muttered. Wolfe's gaze was steady, perhaps. I stood. "Kramer wants us down there." Wolfe shook his head. "He wants you down there. I will remain here." "Of course you will," I said. "God forbid you catch a draft." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "God forbid you waste
Nero
time."
Wolfe and the
I
umbilical
grabbed my
cord of
coat.
his
Wolfe's
watch.
voice
A
stopped
jeweler
me.
shows Wolfe a
"Archie."
watch
I
that only
turned.
runs when someone touches it.
Wolfe's gaze held
Open the
mine.
bag.
"This
There
is
was
the
a
author's
huge
message.
thin wire
He has
like
demonstrated that the
the watch
second
is
body
tied
can
to a
occur
person.
without your
Then a
action.
jeweler
Therefore,
killed
his
the
threat is
jeweler
not
after
conditional
story.
upon your behavior.
Hope you like
It is conditional
Comment
upon his
next, and I will
schedule.
drop part two.
"Which means we can't stop it by sitting still," I said. Wolfe nodded. "Correct. And it means he's not just trying to scare me," I said. "He's trying to prove he controls the rules." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Yes, and that is intolerable." Milo Dent's room was exactly what you'd expect from a man whose ambition never rose above cheap scams. Narrow, stale, with wallpaper that had surrendered to age and a bedspread that looked as if it had been washed in regret. Kramer met me outside the door. His face was like thunder, anger, impatience, and a little something else under it that looked like worry. "You see it," he barked. "I just got here," I said. "Try not to convict me before I walk in." He led me inside. Dent lay on the bed, face turned slightly toward the wall, eyes open in that empty way that makes you want to apologize for being alive. There was bruising at his throat, strangulation. On his chest, placed neatly as if for a photograph, was a typed page. My confession, my name, my signature. I stared at it, and for a second, it felt like seeing your own face on a wanted poster, familiar and wrong in a way that makes you sick. Kramer watched me. "You know Dent?" "No," I said. "Never heard of him." Kramer grunted. "He was small time, Ran errands, stole wallets. Nothing big. Then why put my confession on him? I asked. Kramer jabbed a finger. Because your case is the point. Someone's making a show. I nodded. A bait victim. Kramer frowned. What? A demonstration, I said. The warning is loud. The second body can happen without Archie doing a thing. Kramer's eyes narrowed. So what the hell do we do? I looked at the page again, then at the room. We find where this was typed. Same limp. I bet, Kramer snorted. You and Wolfe and your letters. I ignored him and leaned in carefully, without touching. The R's were there, limping faithfully. Same defect, same machine, same a hand behind the machine. Same typewriter, I said quietly. Kramer's jaw tightened. Meaning what? Meaning the author isn't improvising, I said. He's operating from a base, an office, somewhere with a machine and paper, somewhere he can type my life like it's a script. Kramer swore under his breath. And you're telling me Reddick didn't do it? I'm telling you someone wants you to think he did, I said. That's different. Kramer's eyes hardened. You got anything on Dent? A tech in the room spoke up. Wallet's gone. No ID. Of course, I muttered. Kramer turned back to me. This is getting ugly. It started ugly, I said. Now it's getting organized. Kramer's face went darker. And if that note's true, more bodies. We'll drop, I finished. Yes, I stared at Milo Dent, dead in a cheap room with my name on his chest, and I felt something settle in me that wasn't fear, it was anger. Because the author had made his point, he didn't need my cooperation to produce corpses. He could keep playing while I stood still. He could keep printing my signature while I tried to remember where I bought nutmeg. The game's rules had changed. Or rather, the game's rules had been exposed. The rules were never mine. And now, back in Wolfe's office, Wolfe would do what he always does when someone tries to control him. He would take the rules away. Chapter 5. The courtroom ghost when Wolfe decides the past is relevant. He doesn't reminisce. He dissects. The morning after Milo Dent was found, posed like a cheap exhibit, Wolfe had breakfast with the same stubbornness he applies to orchids and principle. Fritz served eggs that were probably perfect. Wolfe ate them as if perfection were his right, then climbed the stairs to the plant rooms on schedule. Murder does not cancel orchid time. It merely gets fitted around it. I waited in the office, reading yesterday's newspapers with my own name, glowering up at me from between advertisements for plumbing services and tonic pills. When you're the public fall guy, you learn how quickly ink turns into rope. Wolfe descended at 11, sat behind his desk, and looked at me as if I had been left on a shelf overnight, and he was checking for spoilage. Archie, he said, we will revisit the trial. I blinked. You mean the Reddick case? I mean the courtroom, Wolfe replied. The event, the observers, the losers, the ones who learned. He said it as if a trial were a neighborhood with alleys and exits. I sighed. Wolfe, I remember it. You took Reddick apart in front of everybody. Yes, Wolfe said, and somebody watched. I leaned back. Lots of somebodies watched. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Precisely. We will identify which of them had motive and opportunity to employ my victory as a mask. That was Wolfe's way of saying, someone is wearing old history like a coat, and he intended to find the tailor. He opened a file folder. Thick, aged paper, with Wolfe's notes in his heavy hand. He had kept the trial transcript, newspaper clippings, and his own commentary, the way a man keeps a map of a battle he won. Begin, Wolfe said. So I did. I walked him through it as if retracing a city block. The district attorney's posture, the defense attorney's sweat, the judge's impatience, the witnesses. The moment Reddick realized he was trapped and tried to bluff his way out. And Wolfe, calm as gravity, showed the bluff for what it was. Wolfe listened with eyes half-lidded. But his mind was wide awake. He interrupted only to ask the questions that mattered. Who sat behind Reddick? Wolfe asked. His attorney, of course, I said, and a couple of assistants, and someone else. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Someone else. I frowned, searching memory. A private investigator. I remember because he kept leaning forward to whisper, like he thought he was in a movie. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Name. I stared at the ceiling. Names from old cases are like old receipts. You never need them until you do. Then it came. Grant Barlow, I said. Wolfe's gaze held mine. Yes, I blinked. You remember him too. I remember most annoyances, Wolfe replied. Barlow fed tips to the defense. He attempted to undermine my testimony. He failed. That's a lot of people who failed, I said. Why him? Wolfe leaned back. Because he learned. A professional learns more from defeat than an amateur does, and because a private investigator has the skills required for this enterprise. Surveillance, forgery procurement, intermediaries, and the ability to place a false confession into the stream of mail without exposing himself. I frowned. So you think Barlow might be behind it? I think, Wolfe corrected,
Nero Wolfe
that Barlow
opened
is
the
a name
cover
worth
of
scraping.
his watch.
I
A
sighed.
jeweler shows
All right,
Sophie a watch
I'll
that
scrape.
only runs when
Wolfe's
someone touches
eyes
them.
narrowed.
Open
Number
the
first,
back,
we consider how the author
Nero
knew your
Wolfe,
schedule.
like
My
the
schedule
watch
is
is
mostly
tied to a
about where
person,
Wolfe is,
then a
I
jeweler
said.
killed.
Wolfe
That's
ignored
the
that.
way of the story.
He chose a
So
time when you had an
decide
interval
it,
outside the house.
and I will drop
He
out.
either knew that in advance or had means to create it. Like calling with a fake delivery, I said. Or, Wolfe replied, by being familiar with Fritz's habits. Your habits and this house's routines. I made a face. That suggests someone close. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Or someone who has watched. He tapped the folder. A private investigator watches for a living. I stood. Fine. I'm going to Barlow's office. Wolfe's voice stopped me. First, Miss Hume. Clara Hume had been lurking at the edge of my thoughts since she left. A woman with sharp eyes and a shaky voice, offering an alibi for Reddick and asking for protection. Useful, maybe. Wolfe had not called her back yet. But Wolfe doesn't forget a wobbly plank. He examines it until it breaks or proves sturdy. Miss Hume, Wolfe said. Her story is imperfect. I frowned. You don't believe her. I did not say that, Wolfe replied. I said it is imperfect. He reached for the phone and dialed. When Clara answered, Wolfe's tone was polite and firm in the way that makes people comply, even when they don't want to. Miss Hume, this is Nero Wolfe. You will come to my office at once. Her voice was faint through the receiver. Now, yes, Wolfe said, and hung up before she could argue. He looked at me. When she arrives, listen. Clara came within the hour, and this time she looked more tense than frightened, like a woman whose nerves have been turned into wires. She took the same chair, kept the purse in her lap, and watched Wolfe as if he might produce either shelter or a trap. Wolfe began gently, which is always alarming. Miss Hume, he said, yesterday you told us that Cal Reddick was with you on Tuesday evening from 8 until midnight. Clara nodded. He was. Wolfe's gaze was steady. Tell me the address of the attorney who represented him at trial. Clara blinked. Why? Answer, Wolfe said calmly. She hesitated. I don't remember the address. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. The name, then, Mr. Ketteridge, she said quickly. Arnold Ketteridge. Wolfe nodded once. And the name of the prosecuting assistant district attorney. Clara's eyes flicked. I don't know. I leaned back, watching. Any clerk who worked a case remembers the names that paid their rent. They might forget shoe sizes, but they don't forget the people who yelled at them. Wolfe's voice stayed mild. Miss Hume, as a case clerk you handled filings, witness lists, exhibits. You would have known the assistant district attorney. Clara's mouth tightened. It was a long time ago. Wolfe nodded. Indeed. And yet you remember Mr. Ketteridge. Clara's fingers tightened on her purse. Wolfe continued. What was the exhibit number of the ledger introduced on the third day of trial? Clara stared at him, startled. That's nobody remembers that. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. A clerk might. Clara swallowed. I wasn't the only clerk. Wolfe leaned back slightly. Perhaps not. I watched Clara's face. The fear was real, but there was something else now. An effort, a strain, like someone holding a story in place with both hands. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "Tell me what Cal Reddick said to you on Tuesday evening." Clara's eyes flicked.
Nero
He
Wolfe
said,
and the
he said
umbilical
someone
cord
was
of
using
his
his name.
watch. A jeweler
Wolfe nodded.
shows Wolfie a
What
watch that
else?
only runs when
Clara
someone touches
hesitated.
it.
He said he
Open
didn't
the
do it.
back, there was
Wolfe's
a
eyes
pale
narrowed.
thin wire
What
lamp.
else?
The watch
Clara's
is
voice
tied to a
rose
person.
slightly.
Then a jeweler
He said he was
that's
afraid.
figure out the story.
Wolfe's gaze
How would
held
you
her.
like it?
Afraid of
Next,
whom?
and I will drop part 2.
Clara's mouth opened, then closed. He didn't say. Wolfe's voice turned colder. "Then how do you know he is terrified?" Clara's face tightened. "Because I could see it." Wolfe sat back. "You could see it." He was quiet a moment, then said, almost conversationally, "Miss Hume, you are either lying, mistaken, or incomplete." Clara's eyes widened. "I'm not lying." Wolfe's gaze remained steady. "Then you are incomplete." Clara's voice trembled. "I don't understand." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "You came here claiming to help us by offering Reddick's alibi, but your knowledge of the trial is shallow for a case clerk. You cannot recall details that would be welded into the memory of a person who lived through the paperwork." Clara's cheeks reddened. "I was junior," Wolfe nodded. "Yes, that is plausible." He leaned forward slightly. "You are useful, Miss Hume." Clara stared at him. "Thank you." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Do not thank me. Useful people are often dangerous." The words sat there. Clara's breathing quickened. I said, "Wolfe, are you calling her a plant?" "I am saying only that you have access, you have fear, and you have a motive to attach yourself to us. That combination requires scrutiny." Clara's voice tightened. "I came because I'm scared." Wolfe nodded. "That may be true. Fear makes people attach themselves to power." Clara's eyes flashed. "And you have power." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "I have intelligence." Clara stood abruptly. This is insulting." Wolfe's gaze held her. "Sit." It was a single word. Clara hesitated. Then sat again, breathing hard. Wolfe said, "Miss Hume, you will tell us one thing truthfully. Did Cal Reddick ask you to come here?" Clara froze. Then, very softly, she said, "Number." That was the crack, thin but audible. Wolfe nodded once, as if he'd expected it. "Then who did?" Clara's eyes darted. "No one." Wolfe's voice turned icy. "Miss Hume." Her hands clenched. I heard you were involved. People talk, I thought." Wolfe leaned back. "People talk." "Yes." He looked at me. "Archie, escort Miss Hume to the front door." Clara stood, face pale with anger and fear. "You're making a mistake." Wolfe's gaze was steady. "Mistakes are my enemies." "Good day, Miss Hume." I walked her to the hall. She clutched her purse like it contained a life raft. At the door she turned to me. "He thinks I'm dangerous." I shrugged. "He thinks everyone is dangerous. He'd think a kitten was dangerous if it blinked wrong." Her mouth tightened. "If you want to live, don't trust him too much." I opened the door. "If I want to live, I'll do what Wolfe says. That's usually the safest bet." She left, heels clicking like punctuation. I closed the door and exhaled. Wolfe's voice from the office carried down the hall. "Archie, go to Grant Barlow." The door to Barlow's suite had his name on frosted glass. Grant Barlow Investigations. The lettering looked too clean, like it had been scrubbed recently. I tried the knob locked. I peered through the glass. The lights were off. The reception desk inside had mail piled on it. Envelopes, circulars, a small package, stacked in a way that suggested no one had touched it in days. I knocked anyway. No answer. I tried the phone number on the door. Dead, not busy. Dead, like a line cut. That was wrong. Offices go broke all the time, but they don't go silent overnight, unless someone wants them to. I looked down at the floor mat outside the door. Too clean, no grit, no scuffs, no footprints. The kind of clean you see after someone sweeps, not after people stop coming. It felt like a room where there had been a fight, and then someone had tidied up because mess makes questions. I turned and went down the stairs, not because I was giving up, but because I wanted to breathe before I made the next decision. Outside, the street noise hit like a wave, cars, voices, a city pretending it didn't care. I took a walk around the block and found the building superintendent smoking near the service entrance, leaning against the wall with the resigned expression of a man who knows every tenant's secrets and hates them all equally. I flashed him my smile. "Morning. I'm looking for Grant Barlow." The super exhaled smoke. "Barlow, haven't seen him." "How long?" I asked. He shrugged. "Couple days. Maybe 3. "Office locked?" I asked. "Yeah, but somebody came last night," he said casually. My spine tightened. "Somebody," he nodded. "Guy with keys. Came in late. Took a bag out. Didn't say hello." "Describe him," I said. The super frowned. "Tall coat, hat, gloves." I stared at him. "Everybody wears gloves now." He shrugged. "Cold, ain't it?" I leaned closer. "Did he limp?" The super blinked. "Limp? Never mind," I said. "Did he have a heavy bag?" "He had a bag," the super said. "Black, like a satchel." I felt the pieces shifting. An office with a dead phone line and swept floor. A key holder late at night. A bag out. Simone had visited Barlow after the murder. Someone had cleaned, which meant Barlow was either missing, dead, or collaborating. And any of those answers were bad. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened to my report with the calm of a man who already suspects the worst and enjoys being proved right. "Barlow's office is closed," I told him. "Mail piled, phone dead, too clean. Somebody came last night with keys and took a bag." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "A deliberate absence." "Yeah," I said, like someone swept the floor after a fight. Wolfe nodded once. "Then Grant Barlow is now a piece on the board." "A piece," I said. "He might be a corpse." Wolfe's gaze was steady, precisely. I sat down and rubbed my eyes. "And Clara Hume." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Useful and dangerous." I frowned. "You think she's lying about Reddick's alibi?" Wolfe shook his head slowly. "Not necessarily. She may be telling the truth about Tuesday evening and lying about her role, or she may be telling the truth about her role and lying about Tuesday evening, or she may be telling the truth about everything and still be dangerous because she is attached to this matter by
Nero
fear."
Wolfe and the
"Comforting,"
umbilical cord of
I
his
said.
watch. A
Wolfe's
jeweler
eyes
shows Wolfie a
narrowed.
watch that only
"Comfort is
runs when someone
irrelevant."
touches it.
He leaned back.
Open the bag. There was a
"Archie,
here
the author has
number
selected
like
his bait
the watch
carefully.
is
He has
tied to a
used your
person.
name, Reddick's
I feel
history,
guilt
and now
watch
a dead
relay
crook as a
just off.
demonstration.
Hope you
He
like
has
it.
also, it seems,
Comment next and
removed
I will draw
Grant
part
Barlow
2.
from easy reach. "So," I said, "we find Barlow." Wolfe nodded. "Yes. And we figure out whether Reddick is a villain or a decoy," I added. Wolfe's gaze hardened. "Yes." I stared at the desk blotter, at the neat papers with my name on them, at the case file with Reddick's old bruises. The past was a ghost in the room, and it wasn't going to leave until someone gave it a body. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, Wolfe had tightened his focus onto a missing private investigator, a wobbling clerk, and a trap designed to kill people while making me hold the blame. It was a good plan, which is why Wolfe was going to enjoy destroying it. Chapter 6. The typing that talks. The trouble with being framed is that you spend half your time proving you didn't do something, and the other half doing all the things a guilty man would do, sneaking around, asking questions, and trying not to look like you're rehearsing for a mugshot. The morning before, I had gone back to the grocery on 9th and persuaded the night clerk into a written statement. 9:30, 7 by the register tape, 1 tin of nutmeg, 1 pack of cigarettes. He remembered me because I'd argued about the price of nutmeg and stood outside in the cold for a while afterward. I handed the statement to Wolfe, who read it once, set it down and said, "Adequate," which is high praise from a man who rates most human effort somewhere between mediocre and regrettable. The morning before, I had gone back to the grocery on 9th and persuaded the night clerk into a written statement. 9:30, 7 by the register tape. 1 tin of nutmeg, 1 pack of cigarettes. He remembered me because I'd argued about the price of nutmeg and stood outside in the cold for a while afterward. I handed the statement to Wolfe, who read it once, set it down, and said, "Adequate," which is high praise from a man who rates most human effort somewhere between mediocre and regrettable. The morning before, I had gone back to the grocery on 9th and persuaded the night clerk into a written statement. 9:30, 7 by the register tape, 1 tin of nutmeg, 1 pack of cigarettes. He remembered me because I'd argued about the price of nutmeg and stood outside in the cold for a while afterward. I handed the statement to Wolfe, who read it once, set it down, and said, "Adequate," which is high praise from a man who rates most human effort somewhere between mediocre and regrettable. Wolfe, naturally, did none of that. He sat behind his desk and let the evidence come to him like a well-trained servant. Unfortunately, the evidence had been trained by criminals, so it didn't come politely. It came in scraps, dust on cuffs, a limping letter, a dead crook posed on a bed, and a courier who had made an art of not looking. The limping letter was still our best handle. A defect in the R key isn't just a clue, it's a confession. The machine makes every time it speaks. People lie, metal usually doesn't bother. Which is why Wolfe made me go hunting, for a voice made of steel. He said, "Find the typewriter." I said, "Sure, I'll check every
Nero
office in
Wolfe
Manhattan
and the
and report back
unbelievable
before lunch."
wristwatch. A jeweler
Wolfe didn't
shows
smile.
Wolfie a watch that only runs
"Do
when
not be an
someone
idiot,
touches it.
Archie. A
Open the
portable
bag,
machine
there
is
was
more
a
useful to a
sheer
man who
thin
must
wire,
move."
like
"A
the watch is
portable,"
tied to a
I
person.
repeated.
Then a jeweler
"Not a
cute,
desk
let's
model."
figure out the
Wolfe
story.
nodded. The
Hope you
confession
read
letters were
it.
composed
Read
like field
next, and
work.
I will draw
No
part.
letterhead, no office imprint. A portable machine could be kept out of sight and moved when necessary. "Fine," I said. "So where do criminals get portable typewriters?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Where criminals get everything else. Second-hand pawn shops, used goods dealers, and the kind of establishments that do not ask for character references." So I started with the city's second-hand arteries. I made calls. I leaned on a couple of contacts who owed me favors and pretended they didn't. I described the limp R to anyone who would listen. Most of them didn't. Then a voice on the phone said something that made my spine tighten. "Typewriter," the voice said. "Yeah, we got one. Pawned 2 weeks ago. Portable, old, ugly." "Does the R strike low?" I asked. There was a pause. How the hell would I know? "Humor me," I said. "Type an R and look at it." More silence. Then the faint clack of keys. "Well, I'll be damned," the man said. "It's crooked." I hung up fast enough to make the receiver feel insulted and headed out. The pawn shop was on 9th Avenue, wedged between a place that sold discount lamps and a place that sold disappointment in bottles. It had a narrow window full of watches, rings, and electronics that looked like they'd been traded for rent money. Inside it smelled like metal and old sweat, which is the natural perfume of desperation. The owner was a heavy man with tired eyes and a mustache that looked like it had been worn since the Roosevelt administration. He stood behind the counter like it was the last stable thing in his life. "You called?" I asked. He eyed me. "You a cop?" "If I were a cop, I'd be asking for your license," I said. "I'm worse. I'm curious," he grunted. "Curious costs money." "I'll try not to be expensive," I said. "Show me the typewriter." He reached under the counter and set it down with a thud that made it sound guilty. It was a portable, black, scuffed, with a case that had seen rain. The keys were worn, the kind of wear that tells you someone once typed a lot of bad news on it. "Type," the owner said, and handed me a sheet of paper like he was daring me to prove something. I typed one line, just enough to see the spacing and the strike. Then I typed a few words that included an R. There it was, the limp. The R sat low and slightly right, like a drunk trying to stand straight. I exhaled slowly. "This is it." The owner shrugged. "It's a typewriter." "No," I said. "It's a mouth." He narrowed his eyes. What were you talking about? I'm talking about a murder confession typed on a machine with that exact defect, I said. Who pawned it? The owner's eyes sharpened. That's police business. Not yet, I said. And if it becomes police business, you'll be answering questions for free. You can sell me the information now for a fair price, or donate it later under pressure. He stared at me, weighing options. In a pawn shop, everything has a price, including cooperation. Name in the book, he said finally. Denny Pike. I blinked. The courier. The owner nodded, bored. Yeah, came in, said he needed cash. Gave a fake address, I think. Didn't match his face. My stomach tightened. He pawned it under a fake address. Everybody does, the owner said. You want honesty, go to church. I want details, I said. Denny Pike's hands. Did they look like a man who owns a
Nero
typewriter?
Wolfe and the
The
umbilical
owner
cord
snorted.
of
His hands were
wristwatch. A
clean.
jeweler shows
Too
for free a
clean.
watch that only
That made
runs
my
until
scalp
one
itch.
touches it.
Too clean.
Open the bag.
Like he
There
washed him before he
pure
came in,
thin wire
the owner
like
said. But his
the watch is
cuffs.
tied to a
He
person.
paused,
Then
and his
she
eyes
pulled
narrowed as if
that jeweler
remembering
at
something
the
he
store.
hadn't thought mattered until now.
Like it.
His
Comment
cuffs
next,
were
and I will drop
dusty.
part two.
Dusty, I repeated. He nodded. Grey dust, like chalk, like he'd been in a basement or a crawl space. But his hands were clean, that's what I remember. Clean hands, dirty cuffs. That was a picture you could hang on a wall, a man trying to look respectable while his clothes betrayed where he'd been. I said, what day was this? 2 weeks ago, Wednesday, he said. Late afternoon. 2 weeks ago. Late afternoon, around the time our first confession had to be drafted, tested, rehearsed. I looked at the typewriter again, feeling that weird mix of satisfaction and dread you get when you find what you wanted, and realize it's attached to worse things. I'll buy it, I said. The owner's eyebrows rose. You got cash, Ina, I said. Name your price. He named one. I paid it. He wrote a receipt with the reluctance of a man signing away a secret. I carried the machine out in its case, and the case felt heavier than it should have. A typewriter doesn't weigh much. Guilt does. Outside, I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and stared up the street. Denny Pike, the jittery courier. The man who claimed not to look at envelopes, not to look at faces, not to look at anything but money. He had pawned the machine that typed my confession. That didn't make him the author. It made him the glove. It took a taxi back to the brownstone, because I wanted the machine in Wolfe's hands before it got any brighter ideas. Wolfe did not rise when I came in. He rarely rises for anything except orchids and outrage, but his eyes moved toward the case in my hand with immediate attention. You have it, he said. I've got a portable typewriter that limps on the R, I said. Pawned 2 weeks ago by Denny Pike under a fake address. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Excellent. Also, I added, pawn shop owner says Pike's hands were clean, but his cuffs were dusty, grey dust, like chalk, like he'd been in a basement. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Basement dust. That's what he said, I replied. And he remembered it because it didn't match. Clean hands, dirty cuffs. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Bring the machine here. I set the case on his desk. Wolfe did not touch it. He looked at it the way a man looks at a suspicious dish. Archie, Wolfe said, remove it. Type the letter R. Yes, chef, I muttered, and opened the case, set the machine on his blotter, and rolled in a sheet of paper. Wolfe dictated a few words that contained multiple R's, because Wolfe never takes one sample when he can take 5. I typed. The R limped every time. Perfectly consistent, perfectly wrong. Wolfe's eyes narrowed in satisfaction. Now compare. He had the confession and the threat note beside him. He had me type the same words from the confession that included the R. Then he placed the pages side by side and studied them with his magnifier. For a full minute the room was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock and the heavy presence of Wolfe's mind doing arithmetic. Finally, Wolfe leaned back. It is a perfect match, he said. I exhaled. So the typewriter is the fingerprint. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Yes, a fingerprint made of metal. I frowned. And it was pawned by Denny Pike, who says he just delivered an envelope. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Denny Pike is implicated more deeply than he admits. Or he's being used, I said. Possibly, Wolfe replied. But he is still a man with knowledge. We will obtain that knowledge. I stared at the machine. If Pike pawned it, the author let it go. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Or the author believed it was safe to release because its defect would not be noticed. I said, except it was noticed. Wolfe nodded. Yes, by me. That was Wolfe's version of a smile. I leaned back. So what now? We bring Pike in, shake him, make him cry, and he names the villain. Wolfe's gaze turned chilly.
Nero
This is not a
Wolfe, the
melodrama.
umbilical cord
We will
of his
compel
watch.
Pike without
A jeweler
theatrics.
shows
We will
Wolfe
offer
a
him
watch
alternatives.
that only runs when someone
Alternatives
touches it.
like jail or
Open the back,
like
there was
protection,
a hair-thin
Wolfe
wire
said,
like
and money.
the watch is tied to a
Wolfe,
person.
I said,
Then a jeweler kills
you're going to pay the
watch in
courier
of
who
the
helped
story.
frame me.
Hope you like
Wolfe's
it.
eyes narrowed.
Comment next and I
If he
will
is
go
merely a
further.
tool, we will buy him away from the hand, holding him. If he is not merely a tool, we will expose him. Either way, expenditure may be efficient. That's Wolfe. He can turn indignation into bookkeeping. Fritz appeared in the doorway, expression tight, holding another envelope on a tray. My stomach dropped. Mr. Wolfe, Fritz said softly. A messenger left it. He did not give a name. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Open it, Archie. I took the envelope. Same bond paper feel, same crispness, same care. I slit it open and pulled out the sheet. Same typing, same limp, our same forged signature, and this time the message had teeth big enough to bite through the furniture. Prove Archie didn't write it by midnight Friday, or a judge dies. At the bottom, Archie Goodwin for a moment. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the words because the threat had jumped classes. A crook in a cheap room was one thing. A judge was another. Judges have names, schedules, bodyguards, courtrooms. They also have headlines. Wolfe took the sheet from me, not touching the paper directly, but holding it by the corner with the tip of his finger, as if contamination were moral. His eyes moved over it. His face did not change much, but his gaze hardened until it seemed to darken the air. A judge, Wolfe murmured. I found my voice again. Midnight Friday. Wolfe glanced at the calendar on his desk. 3 days. 3 days to prove a negative, I said. And if we don't, somebody in a robe gets strangled or brained, and my name ends up stapled to it. Wolfe's voice was calm. Yes, the author is escalating. Because we found his typewriter, I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Perhaps. Or because he anticipated we would. I frowned. You think he planned for us to find it? Wolfe leaned back. An intelligent adversary plans for contingencies. He does not depend upon our ignorance indefinitely. I stared at the note again. A judge. Why a judge? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Because a judge is a symbol. Killing a judge announces power. It also terrorizes the courts and complicates your defense. And it makes the police hysterical, I added. Wolfe nodded. Yes, hysterical police are easily manipulated. I felt anger flare again, sharp and hot. So what do we do? Wolfe's eyes held mine. We identify the judge. I blinked. The note doesn't name one. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. Then we deduce which judge is relevant to this affair. I stared. Relevant how? Wolfe tapped the old Reddick transcript. Reddick's case involved a judge. If the author is using that history as a mask, he may also use its symbols. Alternatively, Wolfe's eyes narrowed further. The author may intend to kill a judge who is currently inconvenient to his other enterprise. You mean Haskins's work, I said. He was an attorney. Maybe he had documents about someone, and now the someone is cleaning house. Wolfe nodded. Possibly. I pointed at the typewriter. And Denny Pike pawned this. Wolfe's gaze was steady. Yes. Then Pike is our doorway, I said. He's the one human link we can grab. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Precisely. He reached for the phone. Archie, bring Mr. Pike to me. I blinked. How invite him to tea? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Use your ingenuity. Tell him the police have his name from the pawnshop ledger. Tell him the machine he pawned matches a confession in a homicide case. Tell him that if he cooperates, he may remain alive. I stood. That's not an invitation. That's a shove. Wolfe's gaze was cold. It is necessity. I grabbed my coat, but my hands felt clumsy for the first time in years. The note had done that. It had pushed the fear into a new corner. At door I turned back. Wolfe, yes, he said. If a judge dies, this city goes insane. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Then we will prevent insanity by preventing death. That's a slogan, I said. Wolfe's voice stayed calm, and it carried the weight of iron. No, Archie, it is a plan. I went out into New York with a portable typewriter that spoke in limps and a deadline ticking toward midnight Friday. Somewhere, a man was waiting to see whether Wolfe could prove I didn't write a confession I didn't write. And somewhere else, a judge who had no idea he was part of the game was walking around under a shadow with my name on it. Chapter 7. The judge on the list. Wolfe doesn't guess, he deduces. And when he can't deduce, he arranges the world so the answer has nowhere left to hide. By Thursday morning, the brownstone felt like a courtroom itself. Every object a potential exhibit, every visitor a possible witness, every ring of the bell an accusation. Fritz was on door duty like a sentry with culinary skills. Saul Panzer was drifting in and out like a shadow with a hat. And I was trying not to think about the words Midnight Friday, the way a condemned man tries not to think about the calendar. Wolfe sat behind his desk with the typewriter case nearby, the confession letters beside it, and the old Reddick trial transcript open like scripture. He tapped a page with one thick finger. Archie. I looked up. Yes, Your Honor. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Do not be an imbecile. Too late, I said. The note says a judge dies. I'm trying to adapt to the subject matter. Wolfe ignored that the way he ignores dust, with contempt and purpose. The threatened judge, he said, is Harlan Voss. I blinked. You're sure? Wolfe's mouth tightened. Yes, because he presided over the Reddick trial, I said. Because he presided, Wolfe corrected. And because he was memorable. Judge Harlan Voss had been the kind of benchman lawyers feared, and clerks respected, hard-nosed, impatient with theatrics, quick to recognize nonsense. He had let Wolfe speak when Wolfe needed it and cut off Reddick's defense when they tried to turn the trial into a circus. That kind of judge makes enemies without trying, I said. How many enemies does he have? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Many, that is why he is convenient as a victim. Convenient, I echoed. Like a symbol. Wolfe nodded once. Exactly. He is tied to the old humiliation, and he is public. A judge's death is a headline. It would also make your exoneration, if we achieved it, appear to have consequence. I frowned. So the killer wants the story to go like this. Archie gets cleared. Judge dies. Everyone panics. Wolfe looks like a dangerous magician. Wolfe's gaze was steady. Yes. I leaned forward. Then what do we do? We can't guard every judge in New York. We will guard this one, Wolfe said. How? I asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You will go to him. I stared. You want me to walk into Judge Voss's chambers and say, "Hello, Your Honor. Someone threatens to kill you unless my boss proves I'm innocent." Wolfe's mouth tightened. You will not say that. You will observe him. You will learn his habits. You will learn his vulnerabilities. You will then report to me. Observation, I said. Like I'm watching a rare bird. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Yes, and unlike the orchids, the bird may be shot. I got my coat. Before I left, Wolfe added, Archie, do not be heroic. I'm never heroic on purpose, I said. That is encouraging, Wolfe replied. Judge Voss's habitat was the courthouse on Center Street, which has the charm of a granite box and the warmth of an ice chest. The steps out front were crowded with lawyers, defendants and reporters. all moving with that particular New York urgency that says my misery is scheduled. I got inside, flashed a smile at a bored guard, who recognized me from past Wolfe adventures, and made my way toward the corridors where judges move like monarchs, protected by clerks, court officers, and the illusion of authority. I didn't have to see Voss to start learning his habits. A man's schedule leaks through the people around him. Clerks carry it in their eyes. Court officers carry it in their feet. A court officer I knew, big shoulders, small patience, gave me a look that said he didn't want conversation, but would tolerate it if it was brief. "Voss in today?" I asked casually. The officer grunted. "Yeah, calendar's packed." "What time does he break?" I asked. The officer's eyes narrowed. "Why you care?" "I've got a hobby," I said. "It's watching important men remain alive." He snorted. "Lunch around 1. Usually walks to that diner on Worth. Likes the tuna melt. Don't ask me why." That was already something. A routine walk. A predictable place. A predictable time. Predictability is comfort to ordinary people. To a killer, it's a schedule. I took up a position near a corridor corner where I could watch without looking like I was watching. That's an old Archie trick. Look bored, and no one asks what you're bored about. An hour later, I saw him. Judge Harlan Voss wasn't tall, but he carried himself like height was irrelevant. He moved with a brisk, clipped stride, robe flowing behind him like a flag. He had a face that looked carved from impatience, and a gaze that made even lawyers straighten their ties. He came out of chambers, spoke briefly to a clerk, and walked toward the courtroom, with 2 court officers flanking him, not because he needed protection, but because that is how the world arranges itself around a judge. I watched the people watching him. That's where you see danger, not in the target, but in the eyes that track the target. A man in a grey overcoat stood near the wall, pretending to read a notice board. His eyes flicked up when Voss passed, held a fraction too long, then dropped back to the paper. I didn't like him, but New York is full of men I don't like. Then I saw her, Clara Hume. She was across the corridor, halfway in the flow of foot traffic, hat pulled low, coat buttoned tight. She was doing her best impression of a passer-by who had no reason to be there, which was exactly the impression that makes you notice someone. She glanced toward Voss, then away, then back again. Not frantic, not obvious, controlled. And she wasn't watching Voss the way a citizen watches a judge. She was watching him the way a person watches a timetable. I felt my stomach tighten. Clara had been in Wolfe's office offering an alibi and asking for protection. Wolfe had called her useful and dangerous. Now she was in a courthouse corridor on a day when a judge's life had become part of the bargain. I eased into motion, letting the crowd cover me, and drifted closer. Clara saw me at the same moment I saw her see me. Her eyes widened a fraction. Then she did something telling. She turned and walked away quickly, not running, just leaving as if she'd remembered an urgent appointment with the far end of the building. I followed at a distance. She moved down the corridor, past a stairwell, past a door marked employees only. And then, just before she reached the lobby, she slowed, as if debating whether she could slip out unnoticed. I closed the gap. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, voice tight. "What are you doing here? What are you doing here?" I asked. She drew her purse closer. "I have business. Court business," I asked. "You're not a lawyer." Her mouth tightened. "I'm allowed to walk in a building." "Sure," I said, "and I'm allowed to notice when you do it." She held my gaze. "You're following me." "I'm following a lot of things," I said. "Right now you're one of them." Her eyes flicked past me, scanning the corridor like she was looking for a door that led out of the conversation. "Are you working with Cal Reddick?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "Number. Are you working with whoever is using his name?" I pressed. She hesitated. Just a breath. That breath was louder than a confession. "I'm trying to stop something," she said quickly. "Stop what?" I asked. Her eyes flashed. "You don't understand what you're in." I laughed once. I'm in a murder confession with my name signed at the bottom. I'm in it up to my collar." Her breathing quickened. "Go home." "Not a chance," I said. "Clara, why are you watching Judge Voss?" Her face tightened as if the name hurt. "I wasn't watching him." "Then you picked a bad place to not watch him," I said. "Because the note says a judge dies. Wolfe says Voss is the judge. And here you are, pretending you're admiring public architecture." She stared at me, and for an instant the fear in her eyes looked genuine. Then she said something that chilled me because it sounded like truth and threat at the same time. "He won't listen," she whispered. "Who won't listen?" I demanded. She swallowed. "Your boss." "Wolfe," I said. She nodded once, tight. "He thinks he can win by logic, but this isn't logic. This is leverage." I leaned closer. "Clara, who is doing this?" Her eyes flicked again toward the lobby. "If I tell you, I die." I stared at her. "That's the second time someone told me a story with a death clause." She shook her head. "You're trapped." "He's trapped. The judge is trapped." Then she did the one thing that made my suspicion harden into something sharper. She took a step back, as if preparing to flee, and her fingers tightened around her purse strap, like it contained a weapon or a lifeline. "Clara," I said, "don't run." She smiled. Then, bitter, "You can't catch a story once it's been told." And then she turned and disappeared into the lobby crowd. I didn't chase her. Not because I couldn't, but because chasing her would have meant losing sight of Voss, and right now Voss was the chess king. I went back upstairs, watched Voss enter his courtroom, watched the court officers settle into their routine, watched the lawyers lean in and out like tidewater. And I watched for Clara again. I didn't see her, which meant she had either left the building or positioned herself where I couldn't see her, both of which were bad. Back at the brownstone that evening, Wolfe listened without interruption, while I gave him the whole picture: Voss's lunch habit, the corridor watchers, Clara's presence, Clara's evasions. Wolfe sat behind his desk as still as a statue, but his eyes were alive, moving in little shifts as he fitted my observations into his growing structure of logic. When I finished, he said, "Miss Hume was there." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Number?" I leaned forward. "Wolfe, what is she? A lookout? A decoy? A scared witness?" Wolfe's gaze was steady. "She is useful. Dangerous," I reminded him. Wolfe nodded. "Yes," I tapped the desk. "And the judge threat. What's the point? If the killer wanted leverage, he already has me." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "He wants more than leverage. He wants control." "By midnight Friday," I said. Wolfe nodded once. "Yes." I frowned, but the note says, "Prove Archie didn't write it." That's not prove. Archie didn't kill Haskins. It's specifically about the confession. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Exactly." I stared. "He wants the confession disproved publicly." Wolfe leaned back slightly. "Yes, the author desires a public exoneration. Headlines, statements, the police embarrassed, your innocence proclaimed." I felt my stomach tighten. Why would he want that? That helps us. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Not necessarily. Consider what such an exoneration would require." "A demonstration," I said slowly. "A show, like you did in court with Reddick." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Yes, my methods, my sources, my means of acquiring facts." I nodded, the shape of it forming in my head like a bruise. "He wants you to expose how you work." Wolfe's eyes narrowed further. "A public clearing of your name would force me into the open. It would compel me to reveal the mechanism by which we identified the typewriter, the courier, the relevant parties. It would place our sources under scrutiny and potential retaliation. And it would flush out whoever he wants flushed," I said. Wolfe nodded. "Or it would eliminate them." I leaned back, feeling the trap tighten. "So if you refuse to play, I hang." Wolfe's gaze held mine. "If I refuse, the police may proceed against you." "Yes, the author expects that." And if you succeed, publicly, Voss dies, I said. Wolfe's voice was calm. That is the threat. I stared at him. Either way, the killer wins something. Wolfe nodded once. Yes, if I refuse, he destroys you and injures me. If I comply, he kills a judge and demonstrates power while forcing me to expose my operations. I rubbed my forehead. That's a nasty little fork. Wolfe's mouth tightened. It is intended to be. I looked at Wolfe. So what do we do? Wolfe's eyes narrowed, and his voice became very quiet. So quiet you had to lean in to hear it, which is how Wolfe speaks when he is most certain. We do not accept his fork, Wolfe said. We make our own how? I asked. Wolfe leaned back. By giving the appearance of public exoneration without giving him what he seeks. By protecting Judge Voss while compelling the author to act where we can observe him, and by treating Miss Hume not as an ally, but as a lever. I stared. You're going to use Clara? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Of course, she has already used us. I sat very still because the stakes had stopped being theoretical. A judge's life was on the line, my own neck was on the line, and the killer had designed a game where movement and stillness both looked lethal. Wolfe had a way of turning that kind of dilemma into an invitation. He looked at me and said, Archie, tomorrow you will return to the courthouse. You will remain near Judge Voss. You will also permit yourself to be seen. I frowned. Seen by who? Wolfe's mouth tightened. By anyone watching. The author wants spectacle. We will provide a controlled one. And if he takes the shot? I asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Then we will be ready to catch his hand. I stood, because sitting still felt like cooperating with the trap. As I went toward the hall, I had one thought that wouldn't let go. Clara Hume in the courthouse, watching like a timetable, a portable typewriter with a limping run, a deadline ticking toward midnight Friday, and a judge named Harlan Voss, walking around with no idea that my forged signature had put him on a list. Chapter 8. The Wrong Man's Revenge. If you've ever wanted to see New York's sense of irony at work, watch it treat a man like Cal Reddick. Years ago he'd strutted into court in a clean suit and a dirty confidence, and Wolfe had taken him apart in public with nothing but questions and patience. The papers had loved it. The judge had enjoyed it. Reddick had hated it with the kind of hatred that doesn't burn out. It settles in and becomes a personality. Now the city was whispering his name again, but not because he'd done anything clever. It was because someone had found a way to wear his old grudge like a mask. Wolfe didn't like masks. He liked faces, preferably faces he could corner. So he sent me to find Reddick. He didn't phrase it that way. Of course, Wolfe never says, "Go find the man." But the meaning was the same. I was to bring Cal Reddick into the open long enough to see whether he was predator or bait. Finding a man like Reddick isn't difficult. He has the subtlety of a trumpet and the self-control of a loose dog. Even when he's trying to keep quiet, his habits betray him. Old contacts, familiar haunts, places where men with grudges go to feel big again. Lon Cohen's office made one call, Saul Panzer made another, and by late afternoon I had an address that sounded like a lie and probably was. "A card den," Saul said on the phone. Voice mild. "Back room, plays there when he's nervous, which is often." "That's comforting," I said. "If he's nervous, I'm in danger." "If he's nervous," Saul replied, "he'll talk." I hung up and went. The place was a narrow storefront that pretended to sell cigars, which is a business model for people who don't want to explain what they really sell. The front room had a glass case and an old man behind the counter who looked like he had never approved of anything in his life. The air smelled of stale tobacco and the kind of perfume that comes from cheap cologne trying to cover old smoke. I nodded at the old man, asked for a particular brand I didn't care about, and he jerked his head toward a door behind the counter without speaking. That was the sign. I went through the door and down a short hallway into a back room where the light was low and the voices were lower. A card table sat under a hanging lamp, surrounded by 4 men who were pretending to be casual while gambling away their rent money. There was a bottle on a side table, a stack of dirty glasses, and a radio murmuring in the corner, like an alibi. Cal Reddick was at the table. He looked older than I remembered, but not wiser. His hair had gone thin at the temples. His eyes had kept their sharpness, the kind that comes from always measuring angles. How to get ahead, how to get even, how to make sure no one laughs at you again. He held his cards like they were legal documents, and the rest of the men like they were jurors. When I stepped into the room, his eyes flicked up, and the expression on his face changed in a way that told me two things at once. He recognized me, and he didn't want to. He tried to hide the reaction. He wasn't good at hiding. "Evening," I said, friendly as a mortgage. "And you don't mind if I watch?" One of the men grunted. Another shrugged. Reddick's gaze stayed on me like a finger. "What do you want?" he said. "Conversation," I replied. "I hear you're good at it." One of the gamblers chuckled. Reddick's eyes flashed at him, and the chuckle died. "You shouldn't be here," Reddick said. "Funny," I said. "I was thinking the same about you." Reddick's mouth curled. "You and your question. That's Wolfe's trick. Doesn't work on me anymore." "That's great," I said, "because I'm not Wolfe." Reddick stared at me as if trying to decide whether I was bait or trouble. In that room, it's often both. "Boys," he said to the others, without looking away from me, "give us a minute." One of them started to protest, then saw Reddick's eyes and stood. The others followed, with the speed of men who know when not to argue. They gathered their coats and filed out, muttering. Reddick stayed seated, cards still in hand, because a man like Reddick likes to stay seated when he's threatened. It lets him pretend he's still in control. When we were alone, I pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "You look healthy," I said. "For a man everyone thinks is plotting revenge." Reddick's eyes narrowed. "Everyone thinks." "Yeah," I said. "That's the point. Someone wants everyone thinking you." He made a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so bitter. "Wolfe finally scared." "Wolfe doesn't do scared," I said. "He does offended." Reddick's mouth tightened. "Then why are you here?" "Because my name is on a confession for a murder I didn't commit," I said. "And someone says a judge dies if my innocence is proved." Reddick blinked once. It was small, but it was real. "A judge," he said slowly. "So they went big. They went public," I corrected. "So tell me, did you type my confession?" Reddick's mouth twisted. "You think I got time to type? I got time to breathe." I studied him. His anger was real, his pride was real, but there was no calm in him, no sense of structure. The scheme we were facing had design. Reddick had appetite. Those aren't the same thing. "Where were you Tuesday night?" I asked. His eyes flashed. "You got an alibi for me, don't you? That Clark woman." "Clara," I said. Reddick's jaw tightened. "Yeah, Clara. She's smart. She knows what you people do. Does she?" I asked. Reddick hesitated, and that hesitation was interesting. "If this is revenge, why am I the one sweating?" He stared at me a long moment. Then his shoulders dropped a fraction. "I'm being squeezed," he said. That was not what I expected him to admit. Men like Reddick don't confess weakness unless the room is closing in. "Squeezed by who?" I asked. He shook his head fast. "I don't know. That's the trick. I get messages, I get warnings, I get told what's gonna happen." "Like what?" I asked. His eyes darted. Like they'll erase what Wolfe did to me." I blinked. "Erase it how? With ink?" Reddick's mouth tightened. "With the court." He leaned forward, and his voice dropped into something tight and angry. "They said they'd make Wolfe beg." I stared. "Beg the court," Reddick said, and there was relish and humiliation mixed together in his tone, like he hated himself for liking the idea. "Beg the court to clear you. Beg the judge public in front of cameras, like he owns the place." I felt my stomach tighten as the shape of Wolfe's reasoning clicked into place. The killer didn't just want me cleared. He wanted Wolfe displayed, forced into the arena, forced to reveal his hand, forced to kneel to the machinery of law he despises. "They promised you that?" I asked. Reddick's eyes flashed. "They promised me Wolfe's pride would get dragged through the mud." "And what did they want from you?" I asked. His jaw clenched. Nothing, at first. Just keep my mouth shut. Let it happen. Let the world think it's me. Then watch Wolfe scramble. I leaned back. So, you're the villain in the papers and the audience in the balcony. Reddick's face twisted. I didn't ask for it. No, I said. You just enjoyed the thought. He slammed his palm on the table. The cards jumped. I want him to pay. You don't know what it's like. I do, I said quietly. I know what it's like to have your name used like a weapon. That stopped him. His eyes flicked to me, and for a second something like recognition moved behind the anger. Then it was gone. He swallowed. You think I'm smart enough for this? I'm not stupid, but I'm not. That? No, I said. You're not that. His nostrils flared. Then who is? That's what I'm asking, I said. And you're going to help me. Reddick laughed bitterly. Why would I help you? You're Wolfe's boy. I'm also the guy whose name is about to get nailed to a wall, I said. And if that happens, the person doing it gets bolder. That's bad for everybody, including you. Reddick's lips pressed together. He stared at the cards as if they might tell him what to do. Then, he said, almost reluctantly, Barlow. My spine tightened. Grant Barlow. Reddick nodded once. He was around again. Not like before, not loud, but I saw him. Where? I asked. Reddick's eyes shifted. Downtown. A bar near West Broadway. He said he had a line on somebody who could fix documents. I kept my voice calm. Fix how? Reddick's mouth curled. Make anything look like anything. That was it. The hinge. My stomach tightened. Name. Reddick hesitated, then spit it out like it tasted bad. Sam Ketter. I stared. Ketter. He nodded quickly, as if relieved to have said it. Sam Ketter. Barlow called him a document fixer, said he could imitate anything but a conscience. I held Reddick's gaze. And you met him? Reddick shook his head fast. Number hell no. I don't meet those people. That's how you end up dead. I almost smiled. Almost. You're learning, I said. Reddick's eyes flashed. Don't patronize me. All right, I said, but you just gave me something useful. You realize that? He leaned back, face hard. What I realize is somebody's playing with me. Yeah, I said, and they're playing with Wolfe, and they're playing with a judge. Reddick's jaw tightened. So, what do? I stood. I go tell Wolfe. Reddick's eyes followed me. Tell him, he said, voice bitter, that this isn't revenge. I paused at the door. Wolfe already knows. Reddick's mouth tightened. Then tell him anyway. I left him sitting with his cards and his anger. A man who wanted payback but didn't have the brains to schedule it. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in his office with the transcript open, and his expression set to maximum contempt for the universe. He looked up as I entered. Well, I dropped into the red leather chair. I found Reddick. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. And he's alive, I said. Angry, and not smart enough to run a scheme this elegant. Wolfe's mouth tightened faintly. That is my impression as well. He says he's being squeezed, I continued. Summoner promised to erase your old humiliation by making you beg the court, publicly, for my innocence. Wolfe's eyes went hard. Beg, yeah, I said. His word. He enjoyed it. Hated himself for enjoying it. Then got mad again. Classic Reddick. Wolfe's gaze stayed fixed on me. Proceed. Reddick dropped a clue by accident, I said. Grant Barlow met with a man named Sam Ketter, a document fixer. Can imitate anything but a conscience? Wolfe did not move, but his eyes narrowed in a way that made the air feel colder. Sam Ketter, Wolfe repeated. Reddick says Barlow called him that, I said. And Barlow's office is swept clean, phone dead, keys used at night. Wolfe's voice was quiet. Then Barlow led us to the forger, and someone led Barlow to silence. I nodded. And Clara? She was at the courthouse, watching Voss. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Yes, Miss Hume continues to orbit the danger. I leaned forward. Wolfe, this isn't revenge. Not really. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Number. It's leverage, I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed further, and his voice came out like a verdict. Exactly, Wolfe said. The trap is not revenge. It is leverage. He leaned back, steepled his fingers, and looked at the typewriter case as if it were a mouth that had finally spoken the truth. Now, Wolfe said softly, we will find Mr. Ketter. And for the first time in days, I felt something close to relief, not because the danger had eased, but because Wolfe had finally named the real shape of it. A man who wants revenge is sloppy. He wants to hurt you. A man who wants leverage is careful. He wants to move you. Wolfe hates being moved, which meant the man behind the scheme had just made his most serious mistake. Chapter 9. The real signature Wolfe's idea of urgency is not running. It is arranging. On Friday afternoon, with the clock leaning toward midnight, like a threat with a pulse, he did what he always does when the world tries to force him into someone else's game. He invited the game to his office, put it in chairs, and made it behave. By 5 o'clock, the brownstone had the air of a courtroom without the flag. Fritz moving like a dignified sentinel, Saul Panzer appearing and disappearing with quiet competence, and Wolfe in the office behind his desk, looking as if the whole business were a minor inconvenience that had offended his furniture. I was in the red leather chair, trying not to think about a judge's promised death and my own promised disgrace. Wolfe had said calmly, "Tonight we will finish it." And I had believed him because I've seen what happens when he decides. The front bell rang at 5:10. Fritz admitted Denny Pike first. Denny looked worse than the last time I'd seen him. Jittery had turned into frayed. His eyes kept darting. His hands kept rubbing together as if trying to erase fingerprints that weren't there. He wore the same light jacket, and this time it looked as if it had been slept in. He stopped 2 steps inside the office and stared at Wolfe as if Wolfe might either save him or sentence him. Wolfe did not rise. "Mr. Pike, sit." Denny sat on the edge of a chair like it was electrified. The bell rang again. Fritz admitted Cal Reddick. Reddick came in with his chin up and his temper out. He tried to look like a man who had walked into Wolfe's office by choice. He failed. His eyes flicked to me, then away, then to Wolfe with old hatred that had been kept fresh. "You got nerve," Reddick snapped. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Sit, Mr. Reddick." Reddick sat, but he did it as if taking the chair were conceding territory. The bell rang again, and this time the air changed. 2 uniformed court officers came in first, careful and watchful. Between them came Judge Harlan Voss. He was not in robes now. He wore a dark suit that made him look even more severe, and his face had the flat, controlled anger of a man who has been told someone intends to kill him and is offended by the inconvenience. He took in Wolfe's office in one sweep. The desk, the chairs, me, the gathering, and his jaw tightened. "This is irregular," Voss said. Wolfe inclined his head slightly. "Yes." Voss's eyes snapped, and unnecessary. Wolfe's tone stayed calm. Number the judge's gaze shifted to me, then back to Wolfe. "Inspector Kramer informed me that your assistant is entangled in a homicide matter." "That is one way to phrase it," Wolfe said. "Another is, my assistant is being framed, and you are being threatened." Voss's nostrils flared. "I do not respond to threats." "Nevertheless," Wolfe said, "threats respond to you." That landed. Voss's mouth tightened. He sat stiff, backed with the court officers, standing just inside the doorway, like guard dogs trying to look polite. The bell rang again. Fritz admitted Clara Hume. Clara walked in slowly, as if each step required negotiation. She wore the same dark coat and the same controlled face, but her eyes had lost some of their sharpness. They looked tired, cornered. She saw Voss and froze for half a second, then recovered and moved to a chair. Wolfe's eyes stayed on her. "Miss Hume, sit." She did. Then Fritz came in again, and this time Saul Panzer was with him. Saul at his most mild, which is when he is most dangerous. Between them walked a man in a neat grey suit, with careful hair and a face that looked professionally bland. He carried a small briefcase and an expression that suggested he was here for an appointment and might complain about the wait. He glanced around the room once, taking inventory. Wolfe said, "Mr. Sam Ketter." The man's mouth twitched. "I prefer Samuel." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Samuel Ketter sat without fuss, which was the first thing I didn't like about him. A man dragged into a room under quiet force usually protests. Ketter looked as if he'd expected the invitation. Wolfe waited until Fritz had retreated and the room had settled into tense stillness. Then he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wolfe said, "you are here because someone has attempted to coerce me by means of a false confession and escalating threats. The deadlines are theatrical. The logic is crude. The execution has been competent." "You called it crude. It's got your boys sweating." Wolfe's gaze cut to him. "Mr. Reddick, if you interrupt again, I will have you removed." Reddick's eyes flashed, but he shut his mouth. Wolfe continued, eyes moving from face to face. "I will explain the riddle, then I will name the author. Then the police will do their part, if they are capable." Judge Voss's mouth tightened. "Do not presume to instruct the police in my presence." Wolfe inclined his head. "I do not presume, Your Honor, I observe." He looked at me. "Archie." "The confession." I handed Wolfe the original confession page in an evidence sleeve Fritz had provided under protest. Wolfe held it by the edge and lifted it slightly so the room could see the forged signature at the bottom. "This signature," Wolfe said, "matches Archie Goodwin's hand." Denny Pike made a small sound of relief, as if hoping the word matches meant salvation. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. The slant, the loops, the pressure points. "Yes, however, the rhythm is wrong." Ketter's eyes narrowed slightly. The first crack in his blandness, Reddick barked. "Rhythm. It's a signature, not a song." Wolfe ignored him. He looked at Judge Voss. "Your Honor, have you ever watched a clerk sign your name to a stack of orders?" Voss's jaw tightened. "Frequently." "Then you know," Wolfe said. "That handwriting is not only shape, it is tempo. It has confidence, hesitation, speed changes. Archie signs his name with a particular impatience. This signature has the correct form, but the wrong motion," I said, "like someone dancing my steps while reading the instructions." Wolfe nodded once. "Yes." Clara's hands tightened in her lap. Wolfe turned to Denny Pike. "Mr. Pike, you claim you did not examine the confession." Denny swallowed. "I didn't write it, I swear." "I did not ask if you wrote it," Wolfe said. "I asked if you examined it." Denny's eyes darted. Number Wolfe's voice sharpened slightly. "Then how did you pawn the typewriter used to compose it?" Denny flinched. I needed money." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Number, you were instructed to dispose of the machine. The question is, by whom?" Denny's hands started shaking. "I don't know his name." Wolfe's gaze moved to Ketter. "We will return to that." He set the confession down and picked up a magnifying glass. "The signature," Wolfe said, "was not forged freehand. It was traced." Reddick laughed harshly. "Traced, like a kid copying a comic." "Not like a child," Wolfe said, "like a professional." He looked at me. "Archie, describe the method." I didn't love being lectern boy, but Wolfe wanted the room educated, and he wanted it said aloud. "A glass plate method," I said. "You put an authentic signature under a sheet of glass. You lay the new document on top, light from beneath. You trace. It preserves shape, but it kills rhythm because you're drawing, not writing." Judge Voss's eyes narrowed. "That is possible. It is common," Wolfe said. "Forgers use it because it produces a signature that fools the eye. It does not fool the mind." Ketter's gaze stayed steady, but his jaw tightened a fraction. Wolfe continued. "Now, the typewriter." He gestured toward the portable machine case. The letters contain an off-center R. That defect is a mechanical fingerprint. We recovered the machine from a pawnshop where it had been pawned under a false address by Mr. Pike. Denny's face went pale. I didn't know what it was used for. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Then you are a fool. Denny's lips trembled. I was paid. Wolfe nodded once. Indeed, we will discover by whom. Wolfe set aside the confession and lifted the third threat note. Or a judge dies, also sleeved. This, Wolfe said, is where the author made his most revealing error. Judge Voss's expression hardened. My life is not an error. Wolfe inclined his head. Your honor, your importance is not in question. The author's mistake is in the paper. He held up the threat note so the light caught it at an angle. Observe the texture, Wolfe said, eyes on Voss. It is not ordinary office bond. It is a fine stock, slightly heavier, with a specific fiber pattern used in one place. Voss's eyes narrowed. What place? Wolfe's voice was quiet. Your chambers. The room stiffened. One of the court officers shifted his stance, suddenly less sure he belonged in a private office, full of accusations. Voss's face went hard. That is an allegation. Wolfe nodded. Yes, and it is true, I added. Wolfe had Fritz compare it to the stationery from your office, your embossed stock. Voss's eyes snapped to me. How? You gave Wolfe a note years ago, I said. He keeps things like orchids, only flatter. Wolfe ignored me. The confession paper is common. The threat notes are not. Their stock matches the paper used for your private orders. That paper is not sold in shops. It is issued to your chambers. Voss's mouth tightened. So someone stole stationery from my chambers. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Exactly. Reddick barked a laugh. So the judge is the crook now. Wolfe's gaze cut to him. Number the judge is the target, and the source of paper, he is being exploited. Voss's voice was clipped. Who had access? Wolfe's eyes moved to Clara. Hume. Clara's face drained of color. Miss Hume, Wolfe said gently, which is never a good sign. You were seen in the courthouse corridors watching Judge Voss. Clara swallowed. I told Archie I had business. Wolfe nodded. Yes, your business was delivery. Clara's eyes flicked toward the door, then back. Number Wolfe's voice remained calm. You are lying. Clara's breath caught. I'm not. Wolfe raised a hand slightly. Miss Hume, do you know why your memory of the old trial was poor? Clara stared at him. Because you were not the case clerk, Wolfe said. You were an errand runner. You handled pickups, drops, files moved from office to office. You saw enough to sound plausible. You did not see enough to answer my questions. Clara's lips parted. She didn't speak. Wolfe continued. You are Grant Barlow's runner. Clara flinched as if struck. Reddick snapped. Barlow, that rat. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Yes, Grant Barlow, the private investigator from your trial. He reappeared because he was recruited for a scheme requiring surveillance, access, and intermediaries. Clara's breath came faster. He didn't want. Wolfe's voice sharpened. He is dead. The words fell heavy. Clara's eyes widened. Number Wolfe's gaze held her. His office was cleaned, his phone disconnected, a key holder removed contents at night. That was not a man quitting business. It was a man being erased. Clara's shoulders trembled. He tried to quit. Wolfe nodded. Yes, and he was killed for it. Clara's face crumpled. Not into hysteria, but into the controlled collapse of someone whose last support has snapped. I didn't mean, she whispered. He said it was just paper, just leverage. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Tell us. Clara's eyes flicked to Keta, and fear tightened her throat. Keta's voice was mild. Miss Hume, be careful. You are emotional. Wolfe's eyes went cold. Mr. Keta, you will remain silent. Keta's mouth tightened, but he complied. Clara spoke. Fast now, as if words were a fire she had to outrun. I ran things for Barlow, she said. Pickups, drops, messages. He got approached. A man, Mr. Keta, Said he had a client who wanted pressure on a judge. Judge Voss's face went rigid. Pressure? Clara nodded, shaking. Blackmail. Something from years ago. Something in chambers. Something that could ruin him. Barlow was supposed to get access. Paper, schedules, people. He needed a runner inside the courthouse corridors. That was me. Voss's eyes narrowed to slits. You stole stationery from my chambers. Clara flinched. I didn't steal. I took it. A few sheets. It was easy. Clark's leave drawers open. Wolfe's voice was quiet. The paper proves your access. Clara nodded, tears starting but not falling. Barlow didn't know it would become murder. When Haskins died, he panicked, he said. Ketter promised no bodies, just fear. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Albert Haskins was killed because he knew of the blackmail materials. Clara swallowed. Yes, he had them. He was supposed to be the lawyer who managed the leverage, so it stayed quiet. But then something went wrong. Someone wanted the documents, wanted control, wanted it faster. Reddick barked, furious now. And my name, you used my name. Clara flinched again. It was convenient. Everyone believes you hate Wolfe. Reddick surged half up from his chair, but one of the court officers shifted and Reddick sat back down, breathing hard. Wolfe's gaze moved to Ketter. Mr. Ketter, the scheme required a document specialist. You supplied that expertise. You traced Archie's signature. You used the typewriter defect deliberately, believing it would not be noticed or would be dismissed. You used Judge Voss's stationery to anchor the threats to the courthouse and to maintain control. Ketter's expression stayed bland, but the blandness now looked like a mask with strain behind it. That is imaginative, Ketter said. Wolfe's voice turned icy. It is accurate. Ketter's eyes narrowed. You have no proof. I wrote anything. Wolfe nodded once. We have your method, your access chain, your runner's confession, your connection through Barlow, and the stolen stationery. We also have motive, blackmail. Voss's voice came out like a gavel. Blackmail of me. Wolfe inclined his head. Yes, Your Honor. The murderer did not seek revenge. He sought leverage. Revenge is noisy. Leverage is profitable, I added. And he wanted me cleared publicly to force Wolfe into a spectacle. So the blackmail pressure becomes public theater. Wolfe nodded. Exactly. Ketter's mouth tightened. And you think that makes me a killer? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You arranged the machinery. You lit the fuse. Whether you held the weapon personally is a detail. The police will enjoy. The structure remains yours. Clara whispered, broken. He killed Barlow. He said he had to. Said Barlow got soft. Ketter's mask slipped for the first time, just a flicker of contempt. Wolfe saw it and pounced with calm precision. Mr. Ketter, Wolfe said, your conscience is indeed absent. Ketter's voice turned colder. You are making accusations in front of a judge. Wolfe's gaze held his. Judge Voss stood abruptly, face hard. Detective Larkin is waiting downstairs, Mr. Ketter. You will come with us. Ketter rose as well, smooth as oil. On what grounds? Voss's eyes were flint. On grounds of conspiracy to blackmail a sitting judge, theft of court property, and suspicion of homicide. Ketter's mouth tightened, but he did not resist. Men like Ketter don't resist in rooms where resistance is witnessed. They resist in corridors and shadows. Saul stepped in, mild as ever. Mr. Ketter, he said, this way. Ketter glanced at Saul, and for the first time he looked uncertain, because Saul's mildness doesn't promise mercy. As Ketter was escorted out, Denny Pike began to shake harder. I didn't know, Denny blurted. I didn't know about judges. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Mr. Pike, you will tell Detective Larkin who paid you and where you obtained the typewriter. Denny swallowed. He met me in a basement, a storage place. He had papers. He said, it was just a job. Clara made a small sound, like grief choking into anger. It was Ketter. Wolfe nodded once. Yes, it was Ketter. Reddick sat rigid, eyes burning. So I was just a headline. Wolfe's gaze flicked to him. You were a mask. Masks are often useful because they are already ugly. Reddick's face twisted, but he had no comeback. For once humiliation had missed Wolfe and landed where it belonged. Judge Voss looked at Wolfe with controlled fury, and something else, respect, grudging and sharp. You should have brought this to the court, Voss said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Your Honor, if I had, Archie Goodwin would have been arrested. My sources exposed, and Mr. Ketter would have adjusted his plan tonight. You are alive. That is my answer. Voss held Wolfe's gaze a long moment, then nodded once. I will not forget. Please do, Wolfe said. Gratitude is time-consuming. When the room finally emptied, court officers, Reddick under escort, Denny Pike trembling toward the police, Clara sobbing quietly as Saul guided her. Wolfe sat back behind his desk. I exhaled, feeling the tightness in my chest loosen for the first time in days. So, I said, that's it. Ketter did it. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Ketter built it. He hired hands. He used the old trial as camouflage. He used you as bait. He used a judge as a lever. And Barlow? I asked quietly. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Dead, because he attempted to reclaim his conscience. I stared at the desk blotter, at the confession that had tried to become my life. The real signature, I said. Wolfe nodded. Yes. The real signature was not ink, it was method. I leaned back, midnight Friday. Wolfe glanced at the clock. We have time for dinner. That was Wolfe. He could dismantle a blackmail scheme aimed at a judge, save my neck, and still care what Fritz served at 7. I stood, and the office felt lighter, but the relief had an edge. Someone had died. Haskins, Milo Dent, Barlow. Because a man without a conscience had decided that paper and threats could move lives around like pieces on a board. Wolfe had stopped him. And tonight, for once, the only thing dropping at midnight would be the city's noise settling into sleep. Without a judge's name in the headline, Chapter 10, Midnight Friday, no clean exits midnight, has a way of making everything sound final. In that house on West 35th Street, midnight usually meant Wolfe had been upstairs for hours. The orchids had been tended, Fritz had turned the kitchen into quiet order, and I was either reading or pretending to read while trying not to think about the world's ugliness beyond the brownstone walls. This midnight had been promised as a deadline, and promises made by men like Sam Ketter tend to come with bodies attached. By 10:30 on Friday night, the brownstone was not a home, it was a controlled space. Fritz had locked the doors and looked personally offended that the locks might be tested. Saul Panzer had positioned himself where he could see the front hall, without looking like he was seeing it. Inspector Kramer was downstairs, pretending he wasn't grateful for being told where to stand. Detective Larkin was somewhere in the background with a couple of his men, quiet and ready. Judge Harlan Voss was in Wolfe's office, seated stiffly, with 2 court officers stationed like furniture that could move. Clara Hume had been taken away earlier, after giving her statement. Denny Pike had been taken too, trembling and talking. Cal Reddick had been removed with more noise than dignity. The only man still sitting in Wolfe's office who looked as if he belonged there was Wolfe, and the only man who looked as if he didn't understand where he was Sam Ketter. Ketter sat in the chair opposite Wolfe's desk. Hands folded, posture composed, expression controlled. He had the face of a man who believed the world was made of paper and signatures, and that anything could be arranged if you had the right tools. Wolfe regarded him with the calm contempt he reserves for clever men who use their cleverness on cheap ends. Mr. Ketter, Wolfe said, it is now 10:32. Your deadline is midnight. You have insisted on drama. Very well. Ketter's mouth twitched. I insisted on nothing. You invited me. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You were invited in the manner appropriate to your behavior. Ketter's gaze shifted briefly toward the door, then back. You think you've won. Wolfe's voice remained mild. I think you have lost. Judge Voss spoke for the first time in minutes, voice clipped. Mr. Ketter, you are in a room with a judge, a detective, and enough sworn statements to keep you occupied for years. If you have anything to say, say it. Ketter smiled faintly. If your honor expects remorse, he will be disappointed. Voss's eyes hardened. I expect truth. Ketter's smile widened by a fraction. Truth is negotiable. Wolfe made a small sound of disdain. No, Mr. Ketter, truth is stubborn. It is your trade that is negotiable. Ketter's gaze went to Wolfe. Fine, you want the plan. Here it is. His voice stayed calm, which meant he had rehearsed it. I needed Wolfe to act publicly, Ketter said. That's the whole engine. Wolfe is a private man. He hoards methods, hoards sources, hoards leverage, so I forced him to choose, let Archie hang, or step into court and clear him in a grand performance. Reddick's name came into it when Ketter spoke it, like a cheap scent, and after Wolfe performed, Ketter continued, the judge would die clean, public brutal, and it would be pinned on Cal Reddick, revenge, delayed payoff, old humiliation, scandal, newspapers. Wolfe's triumphant clearing of Archie would become a prelude to a judicial murder. Voss's jaw tightened, and my death was a prop. Ketter's eyes flicked to him. Your death was an outcome. Wolfe's voice was quiet. You intended to seal the scandal. Ketter nodded. Exactly, the city would choke on it. The court would panic, and in the noise, my client's problem disappears. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Your client. Ketter's mouth tightened. That's the part you don't get. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. I get it perfectly. You are not the center. You are an instrument. Ketter's eyes flashed with irritation. I'm the one sitting here. Wolfe's voice remained calm. Yes, and you will remain sitting until the police decide otherwise. Kramer shifted, grunting, as if irritated that Wolfe was running the room without a badge. Ketter leaned back. You think you stopped it by dragging me here? I know I stopped it, Wolfe said. Ketter laughed softly. You still have to clear Archie. I felt the words hit my ribs. He said it like a nail. Wolfe did not blink. Number Ketter stared at him. What? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. I never sought a public exoneration. Ketter's smile faltered. It was small, but it was the first real fracture. Wolfe leaned back slightly, steepling his fingers. You assumed that to clear Archie I must perform in court, expose sources, and create a headline. You assumed I would follow your script. That was your error. Ketter's voice tightened. Then how? Wolfe lifted one thick finger. Silently, he glanced at me. Archie, the affidavit. I reached into the file folder on the side table and pulled out the sworn affidavit we'd gotten that afternoon. Signed by the pawn shop owner, notarized, detailing that the portable typewriter with the defective R had been pawned by Denny Pike under a false address, and that Pike's cuffs had been dusted with grey basement powder. I handed it to Wolfe, who did not touch it directly. He held it by the corner, as always, and then he passed it to Judge Voss. This, Wolfe said, is sworn evidence that the machine used to type the confession was in the hands of Mr. Pike, who will testify under oath as to who paid him. Ketter's mouth tightened. That doesn't prove Archie didn't write it. He could have used the machine. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You persist in stupidity. The machine was pawned 2 weeks ago. The confession was delivered later. The chain of custody, established by the pawn ticket and the affidavit, demonstrates that the confession was typed by a party using the machine prior to its disposal. Furthermore, Wolfe's gaze shifted to Voss, the stationery audit. Judge Voss's nostrils flared. My chambers have already conducted it. He looked at Ketter as if Ketter were something scraped off a shoe. A clerk has accounted for missing stationery, Voss said. We have a written record, time window, and a list of staff and visitors with access. Miss Hume's presence in the corridors has already been corroborated. Ketter's eyes flicked, just once, to the door again. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. Detective Larkin has the affidavit, the audit, Mr. Pike's forthcoming sworn statement, Miss Hume's confession, and the physical typewriter itself, which matches the defect pattern on the confession letters. Kramer grunted. We got enough to hold him. Wolfe's eyes narrowed at Kramer. Then do so. Ketter's face had lost its blandness. The mask was slipping because the room had become a box and he could feel the lid lowering. "You didn't clear him publicly," Keta said, voice tight. "Then you didn't meet the demand, the deal." Wolfe's gaze turned icy. There was no deal. Keta leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Then the judge dies." The words were flat, stated almost calm again. "A man who has gambled everything and now tries intimidation because he has nothing else." Voss's eyes hardened. "Try." Wolfe's voice was quiet. "You cannot." Keta's lips pressed together. His eyes went to me, then to the court officers, then to the hall. He was counting bodies, exits, angles. And in counting, he made his last mistake. Because Wolfe's office has no clean exits when Wolfe doesn't want them. At 11:58, Wolfe glanced at the clock. 2 minutes, he said. Keta's breathing changed, slightly faster. At 11:59, Kramer shifted, ready, annoyed, tense. At the stroke of midnight, when the clock clicked over and the house itself seemed to pause, Keta moved. It wasn't a dramatic dash. It was a quick, practiced bolt, the kind that comes from a man who has rehearsed escaping rooms. He sprang from the chair, turned toward the door, and found Saul Panzer in his way, mild as ever. Keta tried to veer. I was already up, and my gun was already out, because if you've spent enough time with Wolfe, you learn one thing. You don't wait for the second move. "Don't," I said. Keta froze, eyes wide with a flicker of shock. "You'll shoot me," I shrugged. "I'm getting bored of hearing lies." The court officers moved in. Kramer barked something. Larkin's men came through the hall like the law finally remembering it has legs. Keta's shoulders sagged a fraction as the reality hit him. Every door was covered, every angle accounted for, every clean exit closed. He was not escaping Wolfe's house. Kramer snapped cuffs onto him with satisfaction that looked like it had been stored for days. "You're done," Kramer said. Keta's eyes flashed at Wolfe. "You think this ends it?" Wolfe's voice remained calm. "For you, it has ended." Keta was hauled out, still trying to look composed, still trying to pretend he was in control of the narrative. But narratives don't matter once the doors are shut. When the room finally emptied, Kramer and his men taking Keta, the court officers escorting Voss, out with renewed respect for locked doors, I sat back down in the red leather chair and let my breath out slowly. Wolfe remained behind his desk, hands folded, expression neutral, as if the whole thing had been a tedious interruption of his schedule. Judge Voss paused at the doorway and looked back. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, voice clipped but quieter than before, "your assistant's name will be cleared." Wolfe inclined his head. "It already is." Voss held his gaze a moment, then nodded and left. I stared at Wolfe. "So that's it, midnight Friday. No judge dies, no headline circus, no public begging." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Correct." "And my name," I said, still tasting disbelief, "is clean." Wolfe's mouth tightened slightly. "It will be clean when the prosecutor signs the document. Until then, it is merely less dirty." "That's the nicest thing you've said all week," I told him. Wolfe ignored that and reached for the portable typewriter. I blinked. "What are you doing?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed, concluding. He rolled in a sheet of paper, ordinary bond, not stolen stationery, and set his fingers on the keys with the reluctance of a man handling a vulgar instrument. Wolfe does not type. Wolfe dictates. But tonight, for once, he wanted the words to come from his own hands. He typed slowly, heavily. The keys clacked like small verdicts. Then he tore the sheet free, looked at it once, and handed it to me. I read it. It said, "Confession, you underestimated us." No forged signature. No limp R. No theatrics. Just Wolfe's blunt little knife of a sentence. I looked up. "You typed this?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Yes." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was finished. Fritz appeared in the doorway, cautious, as if entering after midnight might disturb the house's dignity. "Mr. Wolfe," Fritz said softly, "shall I make coffee?" Wolfe leaned back. Yes, and perhaps tomorrow, an extra pastry. Fritz's face softened, relieved to have a normal request in a night that had tried to be anything but normal. When Fritz left, I sat with Wolfe's typed note in my hand and felt the last of the tension drain out of my shoulders. Outside, New York kept roaring. Inside, the brownstone settled back into itself, as if grateful that the only thing it had swallowed tonight was a bad plan. Judge Voss lived, my name would be clean, and the last note in the case, the only one that mattered, was genuine. Wolfe had written it himself, not as proof, as a verdict.